Okay, let's call the meeting to order. Mike, could you please call roll?
Ms. Benecki. Dr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Essenpler.
Here.
Ms. Hogan.
Here.
Ms. Hollingworth.
Here.
Ms. Paoli. Mr. Seidel.
Here.
Vice President Hogarth.
Here.
President Crooked.
Here. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mike, could you please read the statement concerning open public meetings?
Public notice of this meeting pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act has been given by the Superintendent of Schools in the following manner. On January 12th, 2022, notice of this meeting was posted on the interior of the school administration offices, 1 Lincoln Avenue, Haddonfield. A written notice was submitted and filed with the Haddonfield Borough Clerk, and notices were emailed to the Courier Post and the Retrospect newspaper.
Thank you. We're going to start with presentations with the State of Special Education with Dr. Henderson.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Dr.
Mike, can you share?
Yep.
Okay.
You good? All right.
So tonight I'm going to share information regarding our enrollment and classification, the classification rates, special education population by building, referral data, new initiatives, service enhancements, and behavioral services enhancements. So if we look at this chart here, this is information regarding our pre-K to 12th grade enrollment data. Information here was retrieved from the New Jersey Department of Education. Genesis, which is one of our systems that keeps our student data, and then Frontline, which stores our special education data. The implications in the chart that we will see is increased student enrollment. Genesis student enrollment for this year as of today was at 2,768 students. We see that our special education population is decreasing, and we continue to fall below the state classification rate. So currently, from our October 15th count of last year, we were at 16.22% of our students having IEPs, with an increased rate in student enrollment. So I have broken down the special education population by our buildings. On this first page, you'll see that we have Central, Elizabeth, Haddon, and Tatum schools. Central schools had a population of 437 students, with 38 of those students having IEPs, where they receive related services and special education services. 13 students at Central have speech-only IEPs, which means that they don't require any type of specialized instruction. They receive services from a speech-language pathologist for articulation, voice, or fluency. And then at Elizabeth Haddon, the population is 376 students, with 43 having IEPs, 5 students with speech-only IEPs. Tatum School, population is 432 students, with 53 of those students having IEPs, 8 students with speech-only IEPs. This slide shows our populations at the middle school, high school, and out of district. Currently at the middle school, 99 of our students receive special education and related services. And you can see it broken down by each grade level. The high school has 130 students with IEPs. And you see the breakdown by grade level as well. Currently, we have 13 students that are out of district. We counted our 18 to 21 in that count. Two of the, you can see that two of the students are 11th grade. We have one at 8th, one at 9th, 10th, and one at 12th. So the referral data that you see here, this is starting from 2019 to present. So preschool referrals still accounts for the majority of our referrals in the district. We're at 26.4% of preschoolers who are being referred for special education services. One thing that I want to say about the preschoolers that we have noticed since the pandemic is that there's been a slight increase in the referrals. The deficits that the preschoolers are coming in with are more severe pre-pandemic. Referrals are coming from our parents at 72%, and our school personnel is at 23.7% of those referrals. School referrals broken down by elementary, Central, Haddon, and Tatum. Central is at 18.5%, Haddon at 14%, and Tatum at 20.4%. Haddonfield Middle School is 12.5%, and the high school is 9.1%. We have students who are transferring in as well with IEPs at 5.8%. And then 16.4% are not in school, and that would account for our preschool population. So you can see that the school referrals at preschool still are our majority when it comes to the school referrals. And those referrals are coming from early intervention and parents. Referral types. So when a student is showing any type of deficit and they are receiving services in school to support some of those deficits, those referrals would come from the intervention and referral service team. So that would be our language specialists, math specialists. Sometimes child study team members participate in those intervention and referral service meetings and make recommendations. The full child study team evaluations requests are at 85.5%. And then speech language services are the referrals at 14.5%. So generally, those referrals from speech are coming in because those students have articulation issues as one of the primary concerns expressed by parents. So we have some new initiatives in special education. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, Sunday program was introduced into the district as a multisensory reading program to address reading concerns with our general ed population. And so what we found was students were responsive to the program, but some of the students had additional needs that would require them to need special education services. So one previous conversation I recall a couple of years ago from Dr. Criolla was, if it's working, we don't want to take it away. So what we did this past school year was we had all of the special education elementary teachers trained in a Sunday program. And so this will keep the continuum for any students that are in general ed that receive Sunday instruction, which is a multisensory reading program. The second new initiative that we implemented and our teachers were trained at the start of this school year was Touch Math. So we brought in Touch Math about a year ago we had some of our teachers trained that were teaching in the self-contained classroom. So to keep our students in the general education program and give them differentiated instruction, we now have all of our special education elementary teachers trained in touch math. So they can align touch math with our current math curriculum so that students who are struggling with math will not have a high need of being pulled out for math instruction. They can stay within the general education classroom and receive the level of support that they need. So another new initiative we have this school year is our 18 to 21 program. We entered a memorandum of agreement with Camden County College. So we have a couple of our students who fall within the 18 to 21 range who attend Camden County College. Those students are doing well at the start of the school year. The difference for our students at Camden County College versus the students at the Garden State Pathways program is that our students receive 5 days of instruction versus the other students receiving 4 days of instruction. Our students receive related services from speech therapists, from physical therapists, occupational therapists, tutoring, and in addition to that, we will have a registered behavioral technician on a college campus to support our students. I've already received some phone calls asking if we can arrange for our providers to provide support to some of the other district students. Haven't responded to those requests yet, just because I just need to ensure that our students are getting the supports that they need. And in anticipation for next year that we have a larger class that may be going to Camden County College. At the high school, we have our consultative model. So the consultative model is not a replacement. So I just want to restate, it's not a replacement for our in-class resource. It is an addition to our in-class resource. What the consultative model at the high school level allows us to do is to provide support to students who need support in real time. In the past, students who needed support, they would have to make an appointment maybe later in the day with their special ed teacher, whether that was like early in the morning during dog time or during whatever the office hours are. But now the special education students, at the same time that they have the ICR time, they can request for that additional support from the special education teacher. That can be within a classroom setting, that can be in a separate setting, but it keeps them in the ICR classroom for a significant amount of time. So some of our special education service enhancements this year are at the elementary school. Previously, at the elementary school, we offered our special education students support in a general education for reading, math, and writing. And we did not have ICR science or social studies. Now, at the elementary level, at Central School, all of the ICR core classes are fully inclusive in math, reading, science, social studies, and writing. That means that at Central School, a special education and a general education teacher are with the students in all of the core subjects throughout the day. At Haddon School, we have full inclusion in grades K, 1, and 3, where a special education teacher is with those students for all core subjects. In-class resource for reading math and writing are in grades 4 and 5. In-class resource for math and writing is in grade 2. And at Central and Haddon School, we added 1 full-time special education teacher. So this allowed us to offer our elementary students more time in a general education setting with 2 teachers, one being a general ed teacher and the other being a special ed teacher. At Tatum School, we had full inclusion in grades 1, 2, and 5. In-class resource for reading, math, and writing are in grades 3 and 4. We added 1 special education teacher part-time for pull-out supplemental reading. If anyone has any questions about why all of the elementary schools do not, why don't they all have in-class resource support all day? It's because of the numbers. Some of the schools have 2 sections where there are special ed students in both sections. So with that being said, we could not have teachers in both sections. Central School is one of the schools that does not require a special ed teacher in both sections because the numbers are under 8 for each grade level. At the high school, we added a supportive study hall. So in the past, study hall would be all students in one location, whether that was the cafeteria or auditorium, with the teacher, whether you were a gen ed or special ed student, and you did work. So now we have 4 sections of supportive study hall added to the high school where this is a smaller group, and those sections are taught by special education teachers. Additional service enhancements that we have for this year is neurologic music therapy. So students who are in the intensive teaching, which is our ITT program, Early Childhood Learning Center, our ECLC program, and our middle school multiple disabilities program will receive a research-based music therapy program that will support IEP goals and enhance language, sensory, and cognitive abilities. Inclusion and co-teaching support. Last year, we partnered with Marianne Joseph, who was an inclusion consultant. She will continue to support the district this year with co-teaching, training, and support. She'll continue observations and walkthroughs with the building principals. The support will also include implementation of universal design for learning. Marianne Joseph will also continue to support the high school with the consultative model through observation and coaching. Another enhancement that actually will start installation tomorrow is we'll have 3 integrated sound fill systems installed in the elementary school. So there'll be 1 at each elementary school. So if you're not familiar with a sound fill system, we use sound fill systems for students who may have central auditory processing disorder. Some of them may have a hearing impairment. The sound fill systems are large towers that are located in maybe one section of the room, depending on the setup arranged by the educational audiologist. And they have to be positioned a certain way in the classroom. Some of our students have that in their IEPs, and some of our students have FM systems, which is a personal system that is placed in the student's ear so that sound directly filters into the student's ear. So a few problems that we've had with those systems is, one, we don't always have enough of the towers. So every time a student needs one, we have to purchase a tower for the student. Depending on the recommendation from the audiologist, we have to purchase multiple towers. Another issue we have is when we purchase the personal FM systems, we have students who will try it out for a very short period of time, and during that time, it may not be comfortable for them, or they become embarrassed because they don't want anyone to know that they have any type of deficit, so they don't want that attention. So what we are doing is we're trialing these integrated systems, no more towers around the classroom. The sound field systems will be integrated into the ceilings in the classroom. Teachers wear mics. The sound will be balanced now instead of coming from just one local direction. There are a lot of benefits to having an integrated system. Some of the benefits are students will hear more clearly. During the pandemic, wearing the masks in the classroom has presented with challenges, voice fatigue, not only for students, but for teachers who are talking for lengthy periods of the day. Enhanced listening, it improves speech, intelligibility, comprehension, and retention. Some of the studies that I've read shows that test scores for classrooms that have these integrated systems improve 10 to 30% due to the amplified sound in the classroom. We've had some behavioral services enhancements this year. So we're working with several agencies. We have 5 agencies that we're working with. We're still in the midst of the transition, and I'm hoping that in this transition that our students who haven't been paired easily with the new staff. All BCBAs have a master's degree or higher. So previously we may have had like a BCBA who had a bachelor's degree or just a master's degree. So we do contract with one doctoral level BCBA, and then we have 3 master's level BCBAs. And then in addition to that, we've added 1 district BCBA and 5 district behavior support aides. The behavior support aides also have increased training. So we have our BCBAs and our BSAs who have safety care training. In the past, our behaviorists and the support staff, they had CPI, which is not fully aligned to applied behavioral analysis practices, but safety care training is. Our support staff, they come in with registered behavior technician training. Some actually are BCBAs and or currently in school completing programs.
Questions for Dr. Henderson?
I just want to make a comment on a couple of things. So Dr. Henderson, you talked about the array of reading supports that have been expanded, as well as the math pieces. And you also touched on, I think, something that is really important, and how some of these interventions are expanding into general education. And I just want to note to the board that as recently as like a decade ago, 10 years ago, which it seems like yesterday to me, but we had virtually none of that. When you think about what special education is, at its core, it's specialized instruction. And the level of specialized instruction that I think Dr. Henderson has been able to bring into the district and sustain and expand on contributes to where you see, well, why are the number of classified students going down? It's because we're doing a better job at providing intervention to students so they don't require special education services, or they don't require an IEP because we're able to provide interventions in general education more effectively now, which lowers the referral rate. And then the last piece I just wanted to comment on is the co-teaching piece. And that's something our district has been recognized for as a model program in the state. And despite that success, you didn't just say, hey, we're doing a good job well done, just keep it going. I appreciate how well you organized the co-teaching training to continue to enhance what we're doing, to continue to get better. And again, I think that all contributes to some of the positive data that we're seeing. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
I wanted to add some context in the form of a couple questions on the preschool. So you see a number this big, but we're still really active in the child find process.
Yes.
And our preschool is still inclusive targeted.
Yes.
Okay, so we're actually actively bringing in students with needs. First identifying them at 3 years old effectively, and then bringing them in into an inclusive program so they get used to that inclusivity, the general education environment that we're providing them. So I'm not really surprised at the number, but it's a big number, but it's not surprising because that's intentional.
Yeah, so what we are finding through the child find process is that many of the preschoolers have not been seen by early intervention at all. And so they are coming in with significant deficits that no practitioners from early intervention have had the opportunity to address. So early intervention went through this transition during the pandemic where the providers were not going into the homes, and essentially some were attempting virtual services. If you know a preschooler, like I don't know any preschooler who's paying attention virtually for 5 minutes. I don't know, 2 minutes, but so those attempts were made with some of the early intervention services, and then the parents who did not seek out those services at all are calling us sooner. I've gotten calls way before a student was 2.5 asking, when can I start to register my child to come into preschool? And most of the time, what I do tell the parents who are calling in, because they desperately want help, they have toddlers who are not talking. They don't have language, they have behaviors, and they don't essentially know what to do. So I've helped some parents who've called in with trying to get on the tail end of early intervention until we're actually able to start the process with them. I've offered resources even for private services to some of the parents. The other thing that we are experiencing as well is preschoolers who not only don't have language, their behaviors are significant. They are not potty trained. In addition to having those deficits, they also some of them don't have siblings. So the engagement that they've had is with their parents. So we're seeing an influx of that. It's not only Haddonfield, most of the directors' meetings that I attend, that is the topic of conversation. It's the number of schoolers coming in with deficits. What we started last year was our preschool screening. So we started to send screeners to parents that were showing interest in our programs because we needed more information on the preschoolers. We needed to know what are we receiving and how can we start to help them the minute that they step into our programs. So our preschool, they still remain 100% inclusive. And then our preschoolers who are showing more deficits than most, They are allowed to participate in an extended day where we can target those deficits that we're seeing with related services. It just made me think about the presentation from the the preschool expansion, early childhood center. I could think that right now, I feel like sometimes we don't have enough for the preschoolers because we're half day, or we don't have enough because you can only fit so much into 2.5 hours. Can't fit a lot into 2.5 hours, but our providers, they try their best to fit as much as they can into the reduced day. With preschool being this way in a lot of places, I do see a lot of benefits to us having more to offer the preschoolers, seeing the deficits that I'm seeing.
Thank you.
Terrific work.
Yeah, this is very good.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Klaus is now going to present on HMHS grade analysis.
So, we're taking a look tonight, or I'm taking, well, we're all taking a look. I'm going to show you what I saw and some grading trends at the high school. And so our mission statement, and this drives us directly to our pursuit of being excellent in all of our endeavors, that's academics. This came up this summer. So a question came up about the number of Neumuller scholars we had. Neumuller scholars, those who don't know what they are, Dr. Neumuller lived in town and he left money. We had two different types of Neumuller. We had departmental Neumuller, so one child from each department receives an award, senior award night, for being the hitting qualifications, the top student in that department, math and English, and so on. Then anyone who has an A+ average, weighted GPA when they graduate, also receives a Neumuller award. All right? A+ average is 97% in Haddonfield. And you can see by the chart, you probably can't see it, it's kind of small. So the numbers have been increasing. And 2 years ago, 47% of our students received a Neumuller. So 47% of our students, it said, had a weighted GPA of 97. So the question came, that sounds like a lot. Like half of your students have an A+ average. So we go look into it and say, what's the result? Where's this coming from? What do these numbers mean? What does it say about our grading practices? That's the deep dive we're starting to take now. This is step one, by the way. You're going to see again, I have like 9 questions I have to look at. So we started looking at the grades. So what we did was 10-year back. So we took a 10-year look back on grades. We worked with a company called Linkit. We uploaded 10 years worth of grades, marking period grades for each subject. So we had 10 years worth of grades in Linkit. Mr. Lakai, who couldn't be here tonight, our assistant principal of high school, and I went through and started looking at the grades and looking at how they worked. We focused on the 5 core content areas, the graduation requirements. So language arts, math, science, social studies, and world language. We focus on those because they are the bulk of what you do in school. We didn't put in electives, we didn't put in phys ed and special education courses. For those of us who may not know graduation requirements, in New Jersey now, you're required to have 120 credits to graduate. 70 of those 120 credits come in those 5 core content areas. You're also required to have 20 credits of phys ed, so 90 of the 20 come from there. So that's why we focused on this, because this is the heart of what we're doing. You should note, it is very, very rare for a Haddonfield student to graduate with 120 credits. They're usually closer to 145, 150. There's multiple people taking multiple sciences and multiple histories. So those numbers jump up quite a bit. The other aspect of this is that if you look at the electives and those other areas, pull those grades as well, they tend to be about 95, 96 average over all of those pieces. So they're already up a little bit. So we want to get to the core content area. Our weighted GPA, how we work our weighted GPA. This changed in 2009. In 2009, we went to a weighted GPA that if you are in an accelerated course and you get a 90, it says 90 in your report card, your GPA reads 98 behind the scenes. If you have an AP course, it says 90, you get 12 points, so it's 102 on your GPA. So that's how our GPA works. That's pretty typical. We had a different method back then. It was a little convoluted. So in 2009, we changed over to this system. So we have kids who have high GPAs, 97s. If they're taking a lot of elevated courses, they're getting bonus points in the grades. Does that make sense? Everyone understand? All right, perfect. So this is our 10-year grading trend for all courses. So we went in here for all core courses. We went in here and we pulled it up and we looked at 3 areas, right? So you can see it is raising a little bit toward the end there. Overall, it gets up to about a 93, 94 2 years ago. The gray is the mean. I'm sorry, the blue is the mean. So it gets up. It's been coming up the last couple. You have that 2020 anomaly, which is COVID, but you can see it's pretty consistent throughout. And then I took it by subject. So I'm going to post this tomorrow. There's 60 slides. Every class that falls into that core content area, for 10 years, we have it broken down like this. So you can go see whatever class you want to see, AP US History, you can go see AP Physics, CP English 9, whatever one you want to see, you can see the trends through all 3 pieces. So these are by subject area. It should also be noted that 2 years ago, we went from a 7-point grading scale to a 10-point. Right? So 2 years ago, 93 was an A, now 90 is an A. And what I think is probably too early, you can start seeing it already. Some of the numbers are coming down a little bit to approach. They're dropping. So you see, it's really specifically science. They start coming down as what was once an A is now 93 is now 90 because they're coming back to adjust. So here we have English on the left and math on the right. Once again, there's pretty strong consistency there. World language. This is another one you see that trending going up, like the numbers going up. And here we have social studies on the right and science on the left. And this is a science, these guys just talking about how science grades, they've come down with the grading piece, and so has social studies. So that's by subject area. When we look at by classes, and once again, there's 50 slides of this. I'm not going to do everyone else. I'm not going to do every one of these. But just so you can see how we're looking at this. So here's the language arts. This is English 9, 10, 11, and 12. There's meet mode and medium form. These are non-weighted classes. So a child who got a 90 on here, they get a 90 report card, their weighted GPA is a 9, very consistent. We come in here, these are the accelerated courses. People are getting, you can see here, the accelerated English 11, the grade coming up, and the scores are right around 95. So when their report cards, they're getting 100, or their transcripts is reading out 103 or so. And then this is an example of AP language arts. On the left is literature, on the right is comp. They're getting 12 points out of it. You can see how comp's coming down a little bit too. That's kind of a nutshell of what this is. Now, once again, unless anyone wants to see a specific course, I'm going to go toward the end and really talk about what I think we want to look at and where our next steps are. So I'm going to go through here to see all these. And, some of these, you'll also point out in a second, a couple of them. Let me find it over here. Okay. Science has. So we have some of them broken up by grade level. So CP Physics is taken by juniors and seniors. Math is also taken by multiple class levels. So the way we pulled the data, we broke up these because of the way it looked. So you see here, in CP Physics 12, these drops really off at the end. A couple things there. There might only be 5 of those kids, right? Seniors taking physics because it's a junior level course usually. And it might also be that they didn't want to finish physics in their senior year. They just kind of stopped trying. I mean, all those reasons.
But the bottom number is an 80, right?
What's that?
The bottom number is an 80.
Yes.
80 to 100.
Yeah, this is 80.
Sorry.
This is an 80. This is not that. This is an 80.
Right, yeah. Yep.
But one of the things we looked at is over the last several years, for AP and weighted classes, the number of kids taking weighted classes and AP classes. So on the left, that's the slide I showed earlier, new hours and how they're going up, right? And that's 47%. On the right is the number of kids enrolled in these classes, which is almost double. So over that time. So right now, in 2021, 22 last year, 770 kids, 770 students and seats. Some of them are probably not 770. Because some are taking 3 or 4 or 5 AP classes. So it might only be representing about 200 kids. But there's 770 weighted grades going in AP. Right? So there's 777 times the grade goes in the report card is getting 12 points out of the weighted GPA. And that's part of what's pumping up the grades. That's one of the reasons why the correlation, the lines are pretty close. That's not to say we don't still take some looks, right? So what do we need to look at? So also should point out that we just came out Century Magazine. We have the highest SAT scores in South Jersey. So if our average, our unweighted core content grades are running around 90, that probably correlates pretty well to the school district that does well in the SATs too. It's probably not too far off. But there's bigger questions. What do the grades really reflect? Are they reflecting knowledge? Are they reflecting effort? Are they reflecting knowledge? Or are they reflecting just I'll do what he has me to do, so therefore you get a good grade, right? That happens sometimes. Our students are actually, does getting A mean you're an expert on us, or does it mean you're compliant? Right, because that's two different things, right? And so we want to make sure the A is knowledge-based, not compliant. Right? So that's one of the things we'll start talking about. With other or additional types of feedback, hopefully help to better learning. I mean, the grades we put down, but our goal here is not to get grades. The goal here is to learn and teach. So are the grades reflecting learning? If they're not, how can we better do that? Are there other methods of feedback we can use? This is a big one. Are our grading practices consistent? Does a child in room 204 and a child in room 209, are they being graded the same way? Right? There's consistency through that, because if there's not consistency through that, the grades lose a lot of meaning, right? So we want to have consistency there. And then there's other more practical factors like extra credit, homework. We've been talking about homework, we haven't tackled it yet for a long time. But, if you're talking, increased grades are important, right? We give scholarships out, we give all these things, and extra credit, does that really fall in line with homework? Is that achievement, or is that being compliant? And there are questions we have to ask. I don't have the answer right now. I have some thoughts, and a lot of this could be compliant, but we want to make sure we have those. So the next steps we're going to have is start tackling some of these higher level questions and start trying to look at what these grades really reflect. Is there grade inflation? Right? Those are the type of questions we have to really start looking at and tackling. So with that, board, any questions? All right.
Thank you for your thoroughness. I'll go through the slides and that's a lot of material, I feel like, but yeah, I think it's a great start. It's a conversation we've had. Big topic.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, we will move on to board committee reports. Starting with me and the curriculum department. Okay, we had a very fruitful meeting just a couple days ago, so I did not send out the minutes yet, but I was just having everyone go through them to make sure they're right. We talked about the additions to the ruler curriculum and changes to the ruler curriculum. One of the things we took out was there was a read aloud called The Other Boy. It was a 200-page book, but that doesn't work. These are standalone lessons, and it's a 200-page book is not going to work within the curriculum, but there were other options for shorter reads for one single lesson. They developed slide decks for ruler, which can be so that the lessons can be implemented with fidelity, and all the teachers are not reinventing the wheel. That there's consistency throughout the classes. The decks are available for review. They're online. And there's also for each of the lessons a parent link that will be sent home to parents. Now, because we had a discussion, should you send home the parent link before the lesson or after? We were kind of I think we landed on probably before, knowing that these letters are meant to be sent after. So it's going to have past tense language, although the kids haven't actually had the lesson yet. But we figured that's a better problem to have than having someone not know what their child's going to be doing. September 28th, professional development, they're going to begin the process for teachers and principals to pause and take a look at curriculum content and curriculum maps. We've come across some areas, and I know this is in the board report, where there's curriculum content that we're not sure how it got there. It's a disconnect. The teachers haven't used it and were unaware of it being there. So what they really want to do is go through and flag anything that's incongruent with what's happening in the classroom. And we anticipate this being completed in the next few weeks. There's additional professional development that's going to include the new online math program at the elementary level, Reflex and Frax Math, Start Strong Data Analysis, Pre-K Articulation, PE, and Fine Performing and Practical Arts. Did a lot, so I will give the summary. The curriculum updates, a lot of that is on your agenda for approval for next week. There was a lot of curriculum updating. Most of it was not replacing materials, but more articulating the pacing guides and tightening up the standards, being sure we're in compliance with the NJDOE cross-curricular standards, meeting additional Holocaust and Amistad standards. In science, there were some curriculum changes with the environmental and genetics and social studies. There's an effort to align the central questions to each unit. The digital arts curriculums, adding Holocaust and the Amistad standards. There's a requirement that they're integrated throughout the curriculum. There are 2 new courses at the high school, Design 1 and Commercial Art. There was also a lot of work done in the HMS and at the elementary level. The elementary has Framing Your Thought sequence implementation is just about completed, and that's a great multisensory program that's explicit instruction. So those who are fans of the diagramming sentences, it's similar to that for writing. And that's something that was usually, we were talking about Sunday, implementing some of the accommodations we made for students who were classified, but now everyone can benefit from that as well. And there's a lot of proof that, as Gina was saying, that helps students who are identified and those who are not. ELA specialist is going to be coming in to work and coach our teachers. We have the new middle school world language exploratory program, which we hope will encourage interest in more diverse languages. There is a new music curriculum, which has digital tools to manipulate music and create new music. So that's interesting and exciting for our students. They redid the pacing guides for HMS Math, and there's a preschool update on the alignment of scope and sequence. The updates are on the agenda for this week. We will approve them next week, so we can talk about them more next week if you didn't get a chance to read them thoroughly. Kim Hughes is adding the book Gospel at Colonus to her Greek drama program. Other summer stuff, there was elementary tier one RTI resources. I talked about the framing year project. I hit all that earlier. Chuck met with the ELA teachers to do a deep dive into the curriculum because there are updates coming for those standards. Dr. Malou starts October 12th in HMHS, and then HMS in the 24th. He's our coach for the math programs. Dr. Hodges is going to be coming to coach for our PE curriculum, and we're going to be offering professional development for area PE teachers to come and work with our classes while they get professional development. The ELA curriculum standards curriculum committee is working on ensuring it is aligned with the essential questions and standards. there's going to be a new K-12 climate mandate. And we talked about Ron Smith overseeing the implementation of that. And in 2026, we will have the 100th anniversary of HMHS. So we were looking at building an oral history of the high school. Some of us have graduates that year, so that's exciting. Okay, questions? There's a lot.
Yeah, so I'm thrilled to hear that that subject level structure is starting to take root. We eliminated the centralized curriculum role, and we just thought it wasn't right for us. And so glad to hear that that's happening. And do we think that by eliminating that role that was disconnected from what's actually happening in the classrooms, that part of that, the disconnect that we saw in curriculum versus what's actually going on in the classroom, do we think that that will all be taken care of by the fact that we now have these subject level specialists?
That's the plan. The plan is that, to have experts in areas working to take the standards, put them in, and then also be knowledgeable enough about what's actually in the curriculum and what's happening in the classroom. So we have one centralized person with all the curriculum.
Yep.
It's impossible for that person to know what's truly happening in classrooms as opposed to what may or may not be happening in the maps or whatever. So the deep dive is we're having teachers go back and open up the maps and say, this is what we do or this is what we don't do. And then the question is, are we supposed to do it? Should we be doing it? If not, we've got to adjust and keep up with where we are. Because, and it's not just, it's also, I spoke about consistency in grading. Consistency is a fourth grade in Haddon doing the same thing as a fourth grade in Central, as a fourth grade in Tatum, right? And those maps, the curriculum is what the key to that is. And if it's not accurate and it's not true what we want, we've got to find that out now. And it's frustrating because we're kind of taking a step back right now to go back and dig deep into it. We have to, because there are things in the curriculum, in the written curriculum that simply are not happening in schools and have never happened. So we've got to go back and fix that.
I'm glad that the administration suggested that change, and I think it was the right change, and I'm glad to hear that it's actually, we're starting to get rolling on the new process and the new structure.
Dr. Creel is taking a lead on that too, so I'm very grateful for that.
He's on the spring time.
Figure out what to do.
Yeah, and Jamie, I just wanted to kind of highlight what you alluded to in terms of the 100th anniversary of the Haddonfield Memorial High School in 2026. There were some amazing ideas that came out already. None of this is kind of thought through yet, but just a sneak peek. Chuck had some really cool ideas about how we can use this as an opportunity for current students to really do archival and collaborative research and reach out to alumni and interview them about their experience. I mean, 100 years is a long time. We want to capture the amazing memories and hear from elder folks in our community who were at Haddonfield Memorial High School 100 years ago by 2026, which is pretty exciting. We might not get the full 100 years, but it's just a really terrific opportunity for our students to kind of dive deep into the history and the culture. And we've got such a proud and impressive district. I think that's a phenomenal opportunity, and hopefully we can make it really exciting. In addition to kind of the academic portion, there can be various events, and we've got a strong alumni association. So it's just a great opportunity.
I met with Mr. Boger actually today.
Oh, great.
And we were talking about this, and he's got a group of the history club, and they're just looking for something to do. They actually, this summer they were doing archiving this summer at the Historical Society, so this is going to be a nice kickoff.
Yeah,
we have
perfect.
a bunch of students who love this stuff, and it's going to be a great opportunity for them, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, we have the
Fantastic.
new archive center at the Historical Society. A little fun for the Haddonfield Historical Society. It's beautiful.
Excellent. That's great.
Any other questions? All right, we will move on to Dave for the Finance and Facilities Committee.
We met 9:20, light agenda, because it's not budget season yet. So the first one was a new behavioral network services, with the breakdown of Brett Denovi Associates and behavior services space. We onboarded 3 new and built up 2 existing contracts. One of those services we didn't officially approve as a board. Chuck onboarded them under his superintendent powers during the summer. We will dot I's and cross T's. It'll be on the agenda for next week to approve that vendor. They did start on 9/6, but they haven't been invoiced yet, so we need to approve it so they can pay. The stadium scoreboard, in an effort to always be mindful of the budget. The scoreboard was planned to be a straight swap, take down the old one, use the existing supports, put up the new ones. Like lots of things, the existing supports didn't quite work out. There's a silver lining in that though. So the existing scoreboard didn't go anywhere, so it's working, and it's working for sports. The new board will go right next to it with new structural steel holding it up. So there'll be no delay in service on the scoreboard. That's going to be in the late October timeframe, or whenever the steel could go. Yeah. Lead times. Debated my existence. The Hopkins parcel, we talked about, we hired Enright Tree Services. They were the lowest of 3 bids to do brush cleanup and just general cleanup. If anybody's been past there since Monday, it's a whole different ballgame out there. All the overgrowth has been cleared. So you can actually see the buildings from Kings Highway even, which is amazing, including Cooley Hall. So even though Cooley Hall is getting torn down, we still need to secure it. It's ours. So all the brush was cleared all the way from basically the new property line of Lulworth Hall all the way down to Anniversary Field. It was all cleared. In that, we started to talk about securing it. The first step of securing it is to evict a homeless person that was living in the carriage house, as well as the police arrested 2 people trying to steal copper out of the Pottery Barn. I love the name. So in that, we're going to be installing solar camera systems in the places that don't have power. The carriage house has power because the homeless person had an air conditioner. The carriage house electricity has been restored, so that will be the basis of power for lighting from PSEG rental. So they'll be offering lighting services to light this whole place. Plus, we'll be adding a simple security system as well as the security cameras that will have complete coverage of that property. So we'll know better what's going on there. And the buildings have been reboarded by our guys, and you better bring some equipment if you want to get in those buildings now because they're really boarded up. I don't think anybody can get back in there until we want to be in there. In that same vein, the administration brought the Historical Society, or Historic Preservation Commission, Historic Preservation out to talk about the buildings from the outside. The one building is not safe enough to really enter at all. So we're going to be bringing them back to give us guidance on the restoration process of those buildings. So that's pretty exciting. So we talked about that. HEA contract revision. We went back with a fine-tooth comb, and this is going to be on the agenda, to accept cleanup in language. We had a 3-year contract, a 1-year contract, a 3-year contract, different lawyers, different negotiating teams all together. Instead of everything living in heads, we went through and did a new master agreement, which also incorporated the sidebar agreements that we passed after the last contract. So this will be the new final that our recommendation to a future negotiation committee on both sides is to use the new final so that we have a new basis of language to work from. So that's great. Food service for Haddonfield Friends School. During the pandemic, when the USDA offered the free food program, we were the central cooking point. We have the kitchen and the packing capability. We were doing Haddonfield Friends School. With the rescinding of that program, Haddonfield Friends at the beginning of the year said, thank you very much, we're going to do our own. We realized, maybe it was better that Haddonfield helped us out with that. So we're going to start as of next week, I believe, 27th, right? We will be doing food service. NutriServe will be doing food service for Haddonfield Friends School. And Haddonfield Friends School pays us to actually do the food service, so they don't have their own contract with NutriServe. The resulting revenue that would come from that will be reinvested into our kitchen equipment, if that just makes sense. And then we did our follow-up on the year close financial, so it's not budget season, but it is audit season. So even though the audit's not complete, the financial close is complete enough to be in the draft form for the entire audit package. So we went through that. 2 things to point out: capital reserve came in about $3 million. We're in a capital planning cycle, so that's an appropriate number. The other one that's not so great, we spent 98% of our budget last year. We try to be in the mid-90s, so any surprise expenses, a cold year where we gotta run the electricity a whole lot more, something breaks, that kind of thing. And so we don't like to spend it all, and it's actually inappropriate to be up that high. But because of the breakdown with Brent Denovi Associates being a big ticket item and some other things, we just had to spend more. But at least it's still in 2 digits, and not in 3 digits. That's really bad for money, if it is. The zone PTA. So if you knew or you did not know, the zone PTA is decommissioning and disbanding, and their financial reserves are being transferred. They're their own entity, so they decided to give their financial reserves to Haddonfield School District. It will be $4,000 for each of the 5 schools over the next 2 years, as well as funding director's fund for the next 2 years. So that's where that money will go. And then the teacher grants from the Haddonfield Educational Trust, the pool is being increased from $10,000 to $15,000. So over the last few years, the trust felt like we had to say no, or we had to partly fund things like there was this graphic computer for the art program. We could only buy 1 and not 2 because the rest of the pool would have been eaten. So as a board, they voted and decided to increase the pool to $15,000. So all your ideas, keep bringing them. We'd love to fund them. I say Lynn and I are the reps for the board, and I will be a board member as soon as my tenure here finishes. So I can finally vote after all these years of sitting there listening to great ideas and hoping that they all pass. I will have a say in it. Any questions?
I just have one comment about, because we're putting the new school board now next to the old school board. And I just want to make sure we budget to take the old one down and not, so we don't have 2, it happens sometimes.
Yeah, labor is being
I just
provided by
wanna
the
make
district.
Okay,
So
yeah, I just want to make sure we don't end up with, I know goes without, it would hopefully go without saying, but I just want to make sure that's accounted for.
That's your concern. In committee, one of the concerns was it might be too close to the goalpost, so it's actually going to the other side. So it doesn't get drilled when somebody makes a good kick, right? But from a sight line perspective, it's not the old incandescent bulb style that it's now. It's anybody, please replace your incandescent bulbs. They just waste electricity. But the board will run a lot cheaper, but a lot brighter with LED technology, which means the sight angles are so much better for the board. So even though it's a little closer to the stands, it'll actually be easier to see because you got to be in that right angle. And if enough bulbs go out in the old scoreboard doesn't work. So that'll be a plus as well to not
And
cross our
when did you
fingers.
say this is?
As soon as the steel structure
Okay,
could be.
so hopefully by the end of October.
I have a comment for any of us that are PTA reps. So Directory Spot has been funded by Zone PTA for many years now. So we should probably go back to the PTAs and let them know it will be for 2 more years, but then they need to start working on what the plan is to fund that moving forward. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Dave? All right, Lynn, policy update?
The policy committee met last Tuesday on the 13th. We spent the majority of our time discussing the 2 updated policies on the agenda this month. Policy 5512, harassment, intimidation, and bullying, which is on for a second reading, and policy 8465, bias crimes and bias-related acts, which is on for a first reading. Just to recap, as of now, our HID policy requires that Chuck reports to law enforcement, quote, serious acts or those which may be part of a larger pattern. Our bias policy, as well as our memorandum of agreement with law enforcement, requires Chuck to report bias crimes or bias-related acts involving an act of violence to law enforcement. Otherwise, he has discretion on whether to report them. However, in July of 2021, the New Jersey Commissioner of Education and the State Board of Education updated the administrative code to require that all bias-related acts be reported to law enforcement. So we've now been talking about this for months. We tabled the HIB policy last month in hopes of getting some better answers. Our board solicitor joined us in last Tuesday's meeting, and he confirmed that Chuck does not have an option. He must now report all bias-related acts to law enforcement, or the district can be held liable, and Chuck can personally be held liable. So we've already discussed the concerns that many of us have with this reporting requirement. According to our board solicitor, our best avenue to potentially challenge it, if we wish to, is to pass a resolution expressing our opposition and send it along with a letter to the Commissioner of Education, State Board of Education, and Governor Murphy. Ideally, we could get our local PD and other boards to join in. So hopefully we'll have a resolution on the agenda next week to discuss. In the meantime, policy 5512, the HIB, is on the agenda for second reading this month. We had a first reading in July, tabled it last month, so it's second reading this month. Policy 8465 is on for first reading this month. We actually passed an update to this policy back in March, but the draft the committee received and the draft the board reviewed and approved failed to include the mandatory language requiring that all bias crimes or bias-related acts be promptly reported to the HPD and the county prosecutor's office. So we've talked about the other two policies that are on for first reading this month. Policy 9180 regarding school volunteers. It requires that people who volunteer more than 10 hours per month in the schools do have a background check. During the COVID reopening, we increased the hours to 20 to accommodate the many volunteers needed to help open the schools and supervise lunches. So this update just returns it to pre-COVID requirements. Also, policy 2132, school district goals and objectives. This just as our annual look at this policy, it reaffirms our strategic plan of nurturing social and emotional well-being, inspiring cultural responsiveness, and empowering innovation through flexible learning. It also adds the strategic goals of increasing student levels of belonging and engagement and staff perceptions of school climate. Finally, we discussed policy 5220, which is excusal from class or programs. We discussed the fact that New Jersey law specifically allows parents and guardians to opt their children out of health, family life education, sex education, and dissection of animals. Beyond that, we thought this was an important discussion to have as a full board, so we'll be talking about later. We had some policies for review that were on the agenda, which we did not get to because this was a lengthy meeting, so that's fine. Any questions?
I think we could talk more about it too when we go through governance, if people have specific questions. I'm listening to this right now. Okay, Mike is going to do our long-range facilities plan update.
Yes, we met on August 30th, seems like a long time ago. So over the summer, we had a survey go out to community members, and what we did was we discussed those results in the committee and to see what the drivers could be for a couple upcoming charrettes that we have. We have a charrette scheduled for next Tuesday, the 27th at 7 p.m. in this library, and then also the following week on October 6th at 7 p.m. in the library also. The focuses of both of those charrettes are going to be, the one on the 27th will be mainly on the Hopkins parcel and basically any outdoor facility we have, so athletic fields, things like that. And then the following week will be basically classroom settings, auditoriums, media centers, auditoriums, APRs, et cetera. So that's what the planned agenda is for both of those charrettes. And then we also talked briefly about the beginning stages of potential plans for the property next door to the Hopkins parcel, but obviously we want complete our charrette next week for one more engagement with the community members and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, and just a reminder, we need the plan is it after December, or is it in December we need to submit it to the state
We plan to submit to the Department of Education in January.
in January? Okay. So we're starting to move along to get the bones of the plan after we do the last few charrettes. Okay, any questions for Mike? All right, Dr. Pearl, you don't have anything for us today, right? Mr. Klaus? Nothing today, right, you already did yours? Okay, Dave Seidel would like to make, to address the public board before we, move on to the presidential report.
All right, thanks, Jamie. So Justice Ginsburg, when she would be asked, how does she spend all day debating issues with her fellow justices and still come out with a smile? She would say, we can disagree without being disagreeable. And by and large, the audience at board meetings have lived up to that saying, but during the July board meeting, I did not. I called out a speaker by name in defense of a perceived slight. I personally apologized to that gentleman the next day, which he graciously accepted. Since my actions in a public forum also affect my fellow board members, I apologize to them at our board retreat, which was the next board meeting. Last month, I was moving my house, so I was not here. So tonight, I want to apologize to the public for putting on a display exactly what we don't want to have happen at board meetings. Having the board and the audience be the topic of conversation instead of the issues before the board that we are debating and you are providing comment. We can disagree, and believe, sometimes I vehemently disagree with some of the things that are said up there. But I know your comments are made to influence our vote or our individual positions while we debate and make decisions. I will strive to disagree without being disagreeable. Though don't expect me to wear a I dissent collar. It just won't be. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, so we have a little bit of changes going on today, so this is the first time, so I feel like we'll see how this goes. First off, we have a couple changes to public comment. I want to thank board members for weighing in on this because it was definitely, some people had ideas and they were helpful. First of all, we are, and I feel like everybody's going to be happy about this, no separation between agenda and non-agenda items. We're just going to do the one comment period because it was just unnecessarily confusing and nobody wants to police whether or not it's agenda or not. So we're just going to do the one comment period and we will do it where we do it tonight. So there won't be any comment period at the end, whether it's a voting session or a working session. The session will be no more than an hour, which is normally what we did. That's our bylaws. Each community member is permitted 3 minutes to speak up until we meet our 1 hour cap. Greg has volunteered to be timekeeper, so thank you. Second comments are permitted if you have something new to add, and all the other participants had an opportunity to speak already. So in other words, you have to get into the end of the line if you're going to make your second comment, and I'll make a call. Like I'll make sure everyone did their first one, and then we'll see if anyone wants to get up for second ones. We ask that your second comment be directed at, all comments should be directed at the board. But one of the problems we felt was what Dave is saying too, where we wanted, this is all, everybody is here for the interest of the children and what they believe is right. And so we really want to maintain that community feel. And so make sure that you're addressing the board and not your other community members, because that's really who you're here to speak to. And so one of the things we want to make sure is those second comments aren't just, aren't directed towards other people who have made comments, but just directed towards the board. So anyone on the board have questions about it?
I do, I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to talk this weekend. So obviously I love that people can talk all in one session, but a lot of times some people hang out to listen. Are we saying no comments at the end if they want to comment at the very end, or?
Yeah, we're just going to do the one comment period. we'll see how it goes. I mean, if it's not working, we can always change it later. But for now, we're gonna do the one comment period at the beginning, and that way it can be agenda and non-agenda items.
Yeah, just, so then they gotta wait till the next meeting to comment if they hear something in our discussion. Okay, it's clear, it's good.
Okay, all right, next part is we discussed this at the board retreat, that we need an opportunity to talk as a committee of the whole. So in tonight's agenda, you'll know that we added that, this is our first one. It'll take place during the work sessions and be no more than 30 minutes. So board members are gonna take turns running the discussion each month. Today, we're going to discuss the laws that are concerning opt-out and regulations in surrounding parent statements of conscience. It's always each month going to be whatever is more pressing, like whatever we feel as though this is something that we need to discuss. So we're not going to have it far in advance on the agenda. We'll just, as things come up. Mr. Klaus is going to introduce some of the mandates and regulations around the issue, and then we're going to discuss it. As the facilitator, because we'll all have an opportunity to facilitate, but today I am the first, so we'll see how it goes, so feedback welcome. But as the facilitator, we'll make sure everyone gets a chance to weigh in. As we are an oversight board, not a working board, no decisions are made tonight. Rather, our discussion is going to guide future decision making at the administrative or the subcommittee level. And so that's why we're going to pick an issue that's really pressing for each month. So, okay.
Lynn actually framed the discussion in our policy meeting, right? Policy 5220, parents very conscious, has very limited scope, and some board members felt we should probably talk about that. Given some of the concerns from community members and families, rather than just one to say this is what we're doing, have a thoughtful conversation, and then hear what the board believes. And this is one of these things where a board has basically 4 jobs, right? You set budget, you set policy, you hire a superintendent, you evaluate a superintendent. This is as pure a policy as we're getting, right? So attacking this as a committee as a whole, rather than a committee of 4, really will give a better perspective of the board's thoughts on this and the direction that the district would be going. So that being said, if you're facilitating, Jamie, how do you kick that
Okay,
off?
do you want to do, and who wants to start?
I'm actually, the thing that I want to start with is that this was brought up in our retreat. I think we had a great retreat, and to then be actioning on this, I'm really pleased to know that there will be opportunity for us to talk together and have discussion and then have that go back to the administrators. I'm really pleased.
Yeah, especially because we have some students too, so. We can't be more than 4 of us together. So we never have a conversation except for when we're here. And so it's unique to us to be able, in our subcommittees, it's no more than 4 members. And so this is an opportunity for us to talk as a committee of the whole, but by our laws, we need to be in public to do that. So this is our first one. So one of the we had talked about was the statute that is really governing the NJSLA standards, and we talked about specifically for opting out of health, as you said, Lynn, with the policy, the health sex ed curriculum. That's a more straightforward. I think they actually allow for that. But there are specific, trying to find the language. There are specific rules that there isn't an opt-out for provisions in statutes for LGBTQ curriculum. And then that comes into question for grade levels, because it's in grades 5 through 12. we have the LGBTQ diversity and inclusion mandates. And while we do it in some of the other grades, we do incorporate, because we have LGBTQ families and students, and we've always felt the need to represent, you know, a diverse student body. And so I guess part of, maybe that's a good place to start this question is, the law seems clear about where they can opt out in terms of mandated curriculum. Is that, am I interpreting this right?
The law is very specific to health, family life, sex ed, and dissection boundaries. Beyond that, and I'm going to say this, and Gino, if I'm wrong, I know you're going to help me. So the mandate for the diversity and LGBT plus from the state is it's K to 12 as diversity, and then specifically middle and high school talks about what education has to happen there.
Yeah.
So there is a 6 to 12 kind of, you have to do this. K to 12, you need to talk about diversity, and diversity includes all those classes.
Yeah.
So that's where the struggle is, right? That's where that nuance is. That's what.
I could just add the part of the statute in the K to 12 scope requires the school district to highlight and promote diversity, including economic diversity, equity, inclusion, tolerance, and belonging in connection with gender and sexual orientation, race and ethnicity, disabilities, and religious tolerance.
Yeah, it seems really clear. I mean, I'm looking at the statutes right here, and it seems very clear that K through 12, it's really about belonging, acceptance, and making sure that students are learning that kind of thing. The statute that is 18A 35-4 and 35-5 specifically says it's for middle and high school curriculum. And maybe that's the thing that we need to talk about. So because it says that you cannot opt out, but if you cannot opt out, but you must have it in middle and high school and not in the elementary schools, then maybe we should stay closer to what the statute is, and then we can be in a place where there's not as much conflict.
My interpretation of the statute was that K-12 was not that we're getting into the nitty gritty, but that students would see themselves and their families reflected in the books available to them, the pictures on the walls, like at that kind of a level. So a main character may have they pronouns, or a main character maybe.
Two moms, two dads,
right.
or perhaps with grandparents rather than mom and dad.
Right.
That's right.
Right. And so to me, as an educator, that I know it's been studied, that is the key. If you want students to learn, they have to see themselves in the school and in what they're learning for them to buy in, to even engage. And so I think it'd be really detrimental if we reined it in K4 or 5, whatever. I don't have the statute for me. If we cut that out, there are students in the elementary schools who are non-binary genders. There are families that are not heteronormative. I mean, we have to be responsive to our community. We have to reflect who we are. Not everyone is white. Not everyone is, like all of that. So I think that's really powerful and important to our student learning.
I feel like you said something that I just want to reiterate, because you and I had a side conversation maybe about 2 weeks ago where she shared her interpretation with me that was different than how I initially perceived it. And that was that it's not the nitty gritty. It's not a how-to manual of this is how one couple does this and this is how a different couple does this. It's more just here's what some couples look like, here's what other couples look like, but not nitty gritty how-to.
Right. And I have to say, I mean, my children and their friends are so much better at this than we are because our libraries and our textbooks didn't have, you know what I mean? Like, I grew up in Southern Vermont. It's the whitest state in the union. Like, it was very narrow. I remember our teachers in schools, we got in school buses and went to New York City. When we went to New York City, we rode the subway. They walked us through Central Park. Like, they wanted us to see the world and know where we lived wasn't normal. And now there's so much great authorship. And there's just so many things that we can expose kids to. My own children, my youngest made a Build-A-Bear. I may have said this to y'all before. And when she brought it home to introduce it to her sixth grade sister, her sixth grade sisters wanted to give a compliment to the outfit. It was like, oh, wait a minute. What's your bear's pronouns? I want to make sure I don't misgender your teddy bear. And I just thought that, it wasn't even on my radar. And so I just think our students are so much more fluid with this, that it feels more uncomfortable for grown-ups than it does to them, which I think is so great. Like, it's the advancement of education. Like, it's happening.
How about everyone? I just make sure everyone gets a chance to speak. Do you have, are you keeping time?
I have it.
How much time are we?
We have till 8:49, so we have
Okay.
4 minutes.
Okay.
So fine, we can opt out, but do we encourage families to kind of reach out to the teacher? You would reach out to the teacher and say, they don't get this math concept, or it seems like they might be reading words backwards, but do we accept feedback from a family that says, yeah, this is kind of my comfort, I can't opt out, but can you kind of let me know if they look uncomfortable, having some of these conversations, instead of, just saying, hey, you gotta come to school and it's everything you do. Yeah, you gotta come to school. Some people struggle with math. Some people might actually emotionally struggle with these conversations because of how their upbringing is coming. So are we accepting of that type of feedback from a parent to say, just let me know if they look uncomfortable with this stuff?
Yeah, we have it, yes.
I know
We've been more than just accepting the feedback. We make families aware, if we know their comfort level, of the content of coming. And so it's been more just that. So there has been, so to fully enforce this is a change in our practice. This isn't just saying this, but we allow students, to where this book is being read and to read aloud and say, my kid, we'll skip this. We'll take my lunch out there, whatever the case may be. So this is a change in practice. So to your point, we've done more than just make people aware. We have worked with parents.
Yeah.
For that very reason.
Okay.
And
So-
really, I
You're
think
saying
the important thing is on the teacher level too, because that's where those conversations can happen more fruitfully.
And they know the
And more
students best. I mean,
Yeah,
they spend,
right.
you spend 8 hours sleeping, 8 hours doing stuff, and 8 hours with our teachers, right? So there's 24 hours in the day.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, last night at back to school night, I was in one of my son's classrooms, and the English teacher specifically said, if we're reading a book and if it talks about suicide or sexual assault and one of those things are triggering for your child, like, let the teacher know, if you just sit out that part of the discussion or, something like, teachers wanna know if there's something that's triggering for a child.
Chuck, you said I agree, because I had might have been in the same class, but you're saying if we change, there's no longer, the child can
Well,
sit down. I know it's a fine line where you can get, all of a sudden your kid's not going to school.
This is the crux of the discussion, right? Those situations of a child who was abused or suicide ideation, they're very specific. To say we're going to opt out of everything dealing with X, it is challenging not just for the family but also for the teacher and the child, right? So if we're not going to read anything that has to do with, I'm trying to stay away from the specific we're talking now, so I don't go in general. What does that look like in practice in the classroom, right? So there is a slippery slope of saying, well, we want to be aware and cognizant of this, we're going to be respectful to people's beliefs. Then there's the but, and the one that I'm going to kick this over to Gino, who probably speak to it more articulately, like morning meetings are part of SEL, right? And that's an essential part of what we do in our elementary schools. if we're opting in of all SEL, what does that look like every day when the child goes to school and they're not going to be in a morning meeting? And so that's where you start thinking about, okay, we're not quite sure how to handle this. And this is really talking about how to handle things.
You teed me up.
There you go.
So when you talk about SEL, as a result of a lot of the comments that we've heard over the past few months, we've tried to be more specific and intentional in our language, because SEL still is depending on which source you go to, a broadly defined topic. And as I've said in front of faculties, I bet if I pull 10 teachers or 10 parents and ask me what your definition of SEL is, I might get something a little different. Now, the gold standard of the definition of SEL comes from Castle. And it's really about helping to foster life skills to be able to have well-rounded, supportive, and well-regulated students. It's not anything we do in absence. We're not, believe me, I'm a parent of 4 kids. We're not looking to parent any more children. We're looking to add on to skills. So when you talk about, all right, so what is SEL? SEL at its hallmark is about belonging. It's about conflict resolution. It's about developing a sense of empathy. It's about being respectful. It's about being kind. These are things that we've been doing in our classrooms for decades. That part is nothing new. So when you talk about broadly opting out of something like, all right, I want to opt out of SEL. Okay, so I'll talk about like 4 of our anchor tools that we use as part of our ruler framework. One's called the Classroom Charter. Classroom charters have been around, forever. And what they simply are is a set of norms and rules for the classroom that instead of the teacher just saying, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, you must not do this, it's a collaborative process where the teacher works with the students at all age levels and say, how do we want to feel when we're in our classroom? How are we going to treat each other? And what's that going to look like? So it's a set of class rules. It's called a charter. That's part of our SEL frame. So when we talk about, if we go with this broad swath of having kids opt out, think about the implementation of that. Okay, 3rd grade class, we're going to do our class charter today. We're going to remove students from the classroom for that. I don't know if that's the intention, right? And the other example I'll give, and there are more, something called the Blueprint Conference. And the Blueprint Conference is a conflict resolution framework. And coincidentally, when I was the principal at Tatum School, this was a protocol we used all the time. We didn't call it the Blueprint Conference because didn't know there was a name for it. We just know that research in empathic ways of thinking help kids to develop conflict resolution skills. So if there is an internal conflict, and we're not talking about bullying stuff, that's a whole different thing. You don't do conflict resolution when it's an HIV situation. But for things that are typical student conflict, it's a facilitated conversation. What happened? How did your actions impact the other person? What do you think how that person felt? Are we being asked to opt students out of that? So it does become a slippery slope in the idea of, if we're going to do something, we have to be able to do it consistently. We have to be able to deliver on it. I guess the last point I'll give to this in relation to the social emotional learning stuff, the teacher's reading a book about cooperation. That's SEL. I have concern for teachers also who are very thoughtful, caring, compassionate professionals. They plan what they do. They don't script what they do. And given the needs of the students in front of them, maybe reading a book about cooperation or teamwork. And do we want our teachers now second guessing whether or not reading this book is going to be, is going to quote unquote get them in trouble? Based on conversations we've had with some families, I don't think that's the intent to opt out. I don't think so, but I may be wrong. So how do we try to address it? Try to be as transparent as possible. And that's one of the reasons why we gathered a curriculum committee over the summer to develop slide decks that we post on our website. People are welcome to look at them, ask questions, engage us about it, and work.
And sending the letters home in advance of the lessons.
Yeah, and I talked about that earlier.
we started these lessons 2 years ago in small little steps, and that was a missing piece, and we realized that we need to do better with that. So we're improving the process this year.
But Greg's question, I just want to confirm. Lynn, I believe, said that we're required to implement this as per the state, right? So are we discussing whether we're going to vote again, or are we just understanding it? Because we're not voting, and I don't mean tonight, I mean next week, we're not voting on anything. Are you just seeking to understand the curriculum?
I think we're seeking the guidelines, like where, because there's been more opting out than usual and trying to figure out, I think, giving guidance, right? And
So what can happen is that you guys can interview and say, Chuck and Gino, we think this is where we stand. Can you please put language together that expresses where we are and that can be followed and everyone understands where we are. The easiest thing is the law. Look, what we want to know, you guys are creating policy, we've got to put it into practice. We're looking for feedback on where you eight stand, and Steph's not here, and I stand, so that way we can put together the language that we can give to the teachers and give to the principals, they understand where they are.
And my final question, I think I'm done, but they are allowed to opt out by law on sex education,
Correct.
which is separate and distinct from diversification within the curriculum.
Yeah, and my understanding is you're not allowed to opt out of the diversification.
No.
It's just the sex education.
Health, sex ed, family life, and dissection.
The dissection.
So what's family life?
Good question. Family life is, it falls very closely along with sex ed.
I know I went to
That's-
Catholic school,
that's
we
camp-
called it, our sex ed was called family.
Like, think about what the nurses typically do. I think they do it after school, like in grade 5. It's like a one-day event where they talk about, more
That's such
explicit.
a bad term, right? It's really incredibly nebulous.
I think it's more
It's
about-
outdated,
I
right?
think it's more
They
about,
call it biology.
I think it's more about, yeah.
Puberty.
Puberty,
It runs very close to the sex ed.
Reproduction and puberty.
So, what, we talked earlier about another statute, and we said, well, while we might not like it, that's the law, and that I personally am not interested in spending taxpayer money on legal issues. I'm not interested in having our administration spend time on legal issues. I think that it is our job as a board to be making sure that all of our resources, whether it's taxpayer or administration, that all of our resources are going toward the students. It says very specifically, you cannot opt out of these statutes. There's a statute Rachel, I want to make sure that you didn't misunderstand what I was saying. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have exposure. We should absolutely have exposure. It says it in the statute.
Right.
There's a difference between exposure and curriculum. And the statutes are very clear. Curriculum for K through 12 has to do, and Gino, you read the exact same thing. Highlight and promote diversity, economic diversity, equity, inclusion, tolerance, belonging. With regard to gender and sexual orientation, people have to understand it's okay to have all different kinds of families, and nobody should feel different as a result of it. It says it right here.
And obviously, Lynn, the other key term that you hear over and over is developmentally appropriate.
Yes.
Yeah, and the representation is key, which is why, it doesn't just happen overnight. And like I think that it is something that, that there should be representation, but where I think what Heather was saying, that sometimes it's the impression that it's instructional in some way, but that it's representation that they see themselves. And I think we do a good job of it, but I think that important also is the economic diversity, the religious diversity, disabilities, all of those things are just, I think, important for our students because we are a homogenous for the most part, we're a pretty homogenous community. So the more exposure our students get to other, I mean, sometimes that's the main way they're going to get exposure to diversity. And so, so I agree. I guess the idea is, what are we saying in terms of like options to opt out? Because I do think, was it Dave or Greg, or like the part of like, there are going to be issues, but I think like on a classroom level, like if there, I wouldn't want to eliminate the possibility if a child is going through something at home where it's an abusive situation or they've been traumatized in some way and there is, or suicide or anything like that, we don't want to be so rigid where a teacher doesn't feel like she can't have that conversation. I kind of feel strongly about that. I don't know.
When you say that, are you thinking a certain age or any age?
Well, I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what that kid, I mean, I've worked with, you've worked with kids, and there's some pretty horrible things that happen, and I wouldn't want to read. Like, there are moments where, that kid could read that book next year because they've gone through the process.
Right.
But like, even, I mean, I was a crier. I like, if you would have given me the year my dog died when I was in 5th grade, a book about like your dog dying, I would have been hysterical and helping lead the class. And my mom wouldn't have written me a letter, but it would have been like, I just think like sometimes being sensitive to those, particularly I'm thinking in terms of our students who might be dealing with suicide or suicide ideation, or I think rigid rules, because we are a small community and it is nice to have that communication with teachers. Like, I don't know, am I being too nebulous? I just think that a blanket rule of like, I feel as though parents should still be able to, or like self-advocate. A student in middle school and high school can go and say like, this is, and they should be able to advocate and have that agency.
That's why I was asking about age.
Yeah.
Because I think who does it?
Who does
is
it?
not really opting out. If, if a 6th grader came to me and said, I've had a really perfect experience in this book, is just bringing it all up for me, I'm not sure I can handle it. That doesn't feel like opting out. That feels like helping someone with their mental health and their recovery of whatever happened. Like, I know this is a wrong example, but you know what I mean? It feels different to me.
Being
I
flexible.
agree.
At the discretion of the educator who knows the kid and has the rapport
And
to be able to have that.
And I want our teachers to feel supported that that's.
Yes.
So we're in a tough situation here because that's what we've had up until now. And it's letting those teachers have the discretion, even though the statute says there's no opt-out provision. Understanding that there's reasons and letting the teachers do that. But how do we walk the line between what has existed up until now and what is potentially chaos? That's the problem.
And it's just an issue that is as much curricular as anything else, right? So exposure is not curricular. Right. So as you said, middle and high school, there is curriculum.
Right.
K-12, it's exposure diversity, and they are different. I mean, it's kind of a subtle difference. There is a difference in that. And we're digging deep in our curriculum right now, and maybe this is a time to look at that. I mean, it's definitely a time. Definitely not. That's what we're talking about right now. That might just mean it's a murkier conversation, but it's an aspect.
I have one comment. So, really refreshing at back to school night last night, and then I was so impressed with all of the teachers that I was able to visit. But one of the teachers said that something she strives to teach in her classroom is that she does want diversity of opinion, and she works on teaching her class to. They start out in small groups and then they move to bigger groups because she doesn't want one side forcing their opinion down the other side's throat. I mean, that's almost an exact quote that she, used that imagery. And she said, I'm trying to teach the students to articulate their own side and their own stance in a respectful manner and listen to each other, because that's how they can grow together or learn to become adults and agree to disagree. And I just had to share that because I think a lot of teachers do that, but to hear her articulate that, honestly, I thought it was great because I think a lot of times people argue one side and argue the other with maybe the intent to win rather than the intent to articulate and the intent to understand. And both sides do it on so many different topics.
Sure. Yeah, very good point. It's hard to listen when you're so focused on making your own argument effectively, aren't you?
I'm glad we're teaching it.
We're out of time.
Okay.
Okay.
And I don't know, this is the first time we've done
I
this.
know. I knew 30
I like
minutes wasn't
it.
gonna be enough. I know, it was fun. But
So we
but we have to move
we've
on.
made it
It's like
clear
people
what
Yeah,
we should do.
but the conversation was a good, healthy conversation, but unless we act on that conversation, we just got 30 minutes talk.
Right.
Non-action is an action.
It is.
It's contemplative. I mean, we were definitely contemplative. We're moving in that.
So Gino and I, we're marching over this. We're sort of-
Right,
we're-
yeah,
we're
because I
playing
know
along.
too.
You know, we're marching over to a certain degree.
He was marching.
You want us to pull this all together and put out what we heard and what the thoughts are, and then, I mean, that works.
Do you have enough information to do that?
I think we can, yeah, based on the conversation.
I think we have to circle back with our admin team.
Yeah, and that's where you'll get the language. And I also don't think that you would know better than we would, but does it need, I do think like elementary needs to be same middle school. It would be building level, but it might not look the same at every level. I don't know.
I don't
I
think it
mean,
would.
so
Right.
so keep that in mind.
And Chuck, what exactly, I'm still lost, like what are you writing? What our curriculum's gonna be, what you're recommending, what you heard from?
When a family has those that are read-alouds coming up with their own child, being part of what, they go to the teacher or the principal has to know,
What the process.
is it no, or is it, let's talk about it. Let's figure out what we're gonna do, let's see if we can find solutions. Right now, if we go by that, it's just a no, and I don't think that's who we are as a community, as a school district.
You always have to talk about it, you don't know why
And
they're
so
protesting.
so we're looking for the language to give teachers and principals, the opening for that conversation. Because right now, if we go with this, there's no opening. We don't want no opening. We want an opening that the teachers are, the principal are gonna say, Chuck and Gina are gonna yell at me because this is what it is, and I didn't do that. I listened to the parent, I made a decision. We need to have
Some
an
guidelines,
opening.
right?
We can't just, I try never to live my life where I just say this, there's absolutely no opening. So this is what we're trying to accomplish. Is there a room? What does that conversation look like? What does it entail? So that way there's a guidance. So because otherwise you just have, who's the arbitrator of yes and no? And that's not fair to the fourth grade teacher. It's not fair to the principal. So that's what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to get feedback from you guys so we can understand how the board feels about this, so we can then give appropriate guidance to our staff members
And I think appropriate guidance to families.
and families.
Like what can we ask and what should we not be asking? Because
And maybe
your
ask-
policy is clear, so we know.
Maybe we ask everything, we find out as we work through it, right? I mean, there's no.
I've been a bad time.
No, you're not the timekeeper for that.
For this one.
Yeah, you're not-
You're right there.
We're actually great on it.
Okay.
Next, you want to talk next month's topic?
Oh, next month's topic is still equity council.
Equity council.
Equity council is going to be next month's topic because there's some concerns about the makeup and the bylaws and those types of things. So we're going to start so think about that, let that percolate, and we're gonna talk about the direction of that next
And
month.
until then.
And until then, it's on hold. There's no-
Then there's,
yeah. And it has been,
Okay.
we've
Yeah,
paused it
so it's
since.
nebulous, we need to define some things in its role, and until we have those definitions, we're gonna just say, we want this to operate X, Y, or Z, we don't know if it's doing that, so we need to have that key conversation.
Okay. So that's next week, and then we'll figure out how we're
That
gonna.
won't be next week,
Next
next
month.
month.
Next month,
Right.
next month,
It's only for the
only
work
do the
session.
work sessions.
Okay. Open public comment will now begin. Members of the community are invited to speak for up to 3 minutes at this time. If you'd like to make an additional comment, you must wait until each person has had a chance to make their initial statement. All comments must be directed towards the board, not members of the public. According to our bylaws, comment session can last no longer than 1 hour. This is an opportunity for the board to listen but not debate issues or enter a question and answer period. Please be aware that not all issues brought up before a board meeting will be resolved that evening. We ask you to identify yourself by stating your name and the name of your street. You may then make your comment to the board. While public education can be an emotional issue, we strive to maintain a certain level of decorum at the meetings. Public meetings are recorded and televised, and students often participate. As such, citizens are expected to maintain, and board members are expected to maintain a tone of courtesy and civility.
Okay, if nobody's going to talk, I will.
Start the floor.
First of all, I want to thank the board, and I want to name Bill Miller, if I got the name right, the technician who.
John Miller.
John Miller.
Yes.
John Miller, who I sent an email to him, and I said, oh, please, 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 can you improve the sound system here? He responded right away, and he evidently fixed the problem, which I described as an audio problem for the audience in terms of hearing everybody. And also, even worse, the audio problem on the video that is on YouTube. So he seems to have fixed it. I can't wait to get home and hear the video of this, because this is our first test.
Second time.
And but I learned from here, listening to myself talk. I did do that. When I get closer to this microphone, it produces a sound feedback that echoes then in the audio and the video. So I think this microphone is doing all of the work, and this one gets in the way, and I suggested that to him, so I don't know if he's disabled it or not. And he also mentioned these transcripts now that are live, bless Google's heart that they do this, and I see they go on and off, but I'm so happy for this, and I just want to thank, for him and the board for approving that, because I think it'll be a great big step forward in transparency so that people can hear what everybody is saying. So, thank you. Is my time up yet?
Minute 20.
What?
You have a minute 20.
Whoa. Well, I'll go on. Give me a heads up. I've got more to say. So about transparency, this is the topic that I want to focus on, one of the topics. I just want to say, I read a notice from the board, and I just do not understand this last sentence from the whoever sent it out from the district. As part of our continued efforts to be transparent as to the conversations that drive decision-making in the district, we have recently considered the format for the Board of Education's work sessions. And then it says the topic tonight will be the scope and application of a parent's statement of conflict with conscience. Now that's a sentence I don't understand, so I guess it's me, but I'll read it again. And,
27.
tell me what it means, I'll be happy. The topic for September 22nd will be the scope and application of a parent's statement of conflict with conscience. I'm not going to ask you to explain that right now. I just want to tell you, I didn't understand it. I asked a couple of people more intelligent.
We're trying to get it back and forth. Simply stated, policy 5220 we just spoke about is the parent statement of conflict of conscience. That's what that policy is called.
That's technically the New
That's technically
Jersey's
the New
language.
Jersey.
That they
so that's
use. It
the
means
language
opt out, but
for
it is
that.
the New Jersey.
All right, now if you put it in capital letters, that's the topic. With a link to it, that would have been very helpful. But for somebody who's unknowing about what it is you might be talking about, I'm just reading the words.
You gotta be respectful in 3 minutes.
All right.
Sorry.
Thank you.
So,
Wait, I think you're
You're done.
Thank you very much.
Hi, please let me know, I get a little nervous at these things, so I prepared something, please let me know if I'm running out of time. I just wanted, I'm sorry?
Name
Oh, I'm so sorry, Margot Kaplan, Washington Avenue. I just want to say, first of all, my remarks about the curriculum discussing representing different gender identities and sexual orientation is not about the sex ed curriculum. I wanted to talk about some of the arguments that you are hearing and to rebut some of them to help sort of clarify and maybe focus our discussion. First, the argument, kids can't understand concepts of gender at a young age or sexual orientation at a young age. This argument was commonly used in support of Florida's Don't Say Gay law, which specifically prohibits the mention of gender or sexual orientation in K through 3. Research on kids' understanding of genders is just the opposite. Kids form concepts of gender in early toddlerhood. They develop gender identity between ages 3 and 5. They're interested in the concept and seek information about what it means as they grow. They adopt gender stereotypes. The books that were read aloud at previous meetings explain these concepts in age-appropriate ways. Honestly, the argument sounds less to me, will kids be able to understand this, and more, what if my kid does understand this? What if they understand something that I disagree with? Fine, but say that, please. Second argument, the curriculum takes power away from families and parents to talk to kids about sexual orientation and gender identity. Literally no one is preventing anyone from having this discussion with their kids. On the contrary, this encourages families to have these discussions. So stop telling our teachers not to talk about something in school just because you don't want to talk about it at home, that's not their job. Teaching kids about gender or sexual orientation will sexualize them. First of all, gender is not about sexual activity or sexuality. Second, the curriculum's approach isn't about sex acts or being sexual. It's about love, relationships, respect, representation. And third, it's a thinly veiled disguise that argument that LGBTQ plus people and identities are inherently more sexual and deviant. No one's arguing that it sexualizes to kids to see Cinderella marrying Prince Charming or to know that mom and dad love each other. But if you're okay with kids learning that men and women can be in love, but not that men and men can be in love, I think that you need to interrogate why that is. Finally, not wanting discussions of LGBTQ plus issues in schools isn't homophobic, transphobic, or intolerant in any way. These are just risky, sensitive, personal topics. Please stop pretending, when you hear these arguments, please let's not pretend that they're neutral. Let's not pretend they don't treat LGBTQ plus people and relationships differently than cisgender and straight ones. The arguments are premised on the same assumption: learning about cisgender and straight people is neither confusing to kids nor sexualizes them, but learning about other genders and sexual orientations is confusing and sexualizes them. On a more personal note, the argument that it harms kids to learn about your gender, your orientation, your families, this is harmful to kids and families to hear this about themselves. Commenter after commenter has said this. All right, so I'll just say at a certain point, when people are telling you why your arguments are both unsupported by evidence and hurtful, and you keep repeating them, it becomes less credible that you don't need to hurt anyone, or at the very least that you care about what we do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Evening, Jeff Stoner from Avondale Avenue. I think something that we haven't had a broader discussion about that we need to consider when we come to sensitive, complex topics like sexuality, gender issues, and things of that nature is, what is the role of public education? What is the role of the state? Where are the lines for what the state does? And what is the role of the parents? Because children, especially through late elementary school years, when they're very young and impressionable, those are the years when the family knows best about when those children are ready to hear about issues like sexuality, transgender issues. They know what child's ready for it and when the child is not ready for that. It is not the state or the school or curriculum that knows the children best, who has that obligation. Rests on us as the parents. So by staying neutral on those issues, not introducing them at a young age, it allows parents to assume the role that they know best for their children. Obviously, at some point when kids get to be into middle school and high school, these are issues that are emerging as part of puberty and other questions that they ask about themselves and relationships. And then there's a different role, a different discussion we have about how do we go about doing that, especially when kids are in elementary school. It is the obligation of the parents to have that conversation. People who have strong feelings because of their own family relationships and people around them, it's fine for them to have those discussions with their kids, because obviously they're being introduced to those issues in different ways. That allows people, no one wants to prohibit people from having those discussions, but it's most important that it happens individual to each child who develops differently. My 5-year-old might be ready for a discussion that my 12-year-old isn't ready for at that point. They may have different questions. So by introducing a curriculum that demands one size fits all and that the state will teach it, and placing that upon a teacher, and as good as our teachers are and trying hard, they don't know our kids the best. We know our kids the best. So that's something I'd like this board to consider as you look at putting policies in place. Whose children are they? Especially in the young years when they're developing, they don't even have those senses. You don't know how they're developing. It's the parents' obligation. So please, we are asking as you do that, respect the rights of the parents. It is not the school board's job, and it's not the administration's job to impose these issues and to teach them from one standpoint that may be in conflict with the family's moral, religious, conscientious beliefs. Thank you.
Do you need my street as well, or just?
Yeah, just your name and your first name and your street.
All right. Good evening, distinguished board members, students, parents, faculty, and district residents. My name is Rania Kalori. I live on Warwick Road, and I'm a current senior enrolled in Haddonfield Memorial High School. Not only am I a student, but like most peers, I'm an athlete. Well, not a very good athlete, but and a leader of several clubs and organizations at our school. I took time to read these pamphlets before coming on here to speak. I thought that it was important to see firsthand what parents and residents are asking and how I could interpret that from the student perspective. Frankly, it upset me. I strongly believe that we are in a position of incredible privilege to be receiving such a good education, and this pamphlet just respects our teachers and educators who have trained incredibly hard to provide for us the best education possible. Not only that, but as a current student who has gone through the Haddonfield school system, I think we would be the most qualified to address and react to their concerns, if you will. Throughout my time at the high school, I have taken race, class, and gender, criminal law, which are optional electives, and all the history curriculums that are mandatory. Not once in any of these classes was critical race theory brought up. I would know, because as a curious student, I've asked in at least 2 of these classes, and my teachers properly explained that this is a concept so complex that we cannot possibly properly introduce it and teach it in high school. It is something that requires an entire college course of professional law school or undergraduate setting to properly educate on. And I can add that as a girl of color, I have not felt an ounce of division between myself and my peers that was inflicted by our education. History is history, and it needs to be taught. As students, we cannot leave these enclosed towns that we are sheltered from certain ideologies. I understand as parents who want to protect your child from these dangers, but learning about crucial aspects of our nation's history, including both the triumphs and mistakes of historical figures, is imperative. In college, there will be more diversity. There will be more educational and controversial topics. And as parents, don't you want to prepare your children so they can properly be trained on how to handle such a heavy curriculum? The Haddonfield school system is a great one at that. We have these optional courses on certain issues that one class simply cannot cover. If the government is mandating education on certain histories and topics, shouldn't we understand that as citizens we need to be informed at least on these basic manners? Nobody is telling your child to take government or race, class, and gender or any of these electives or social sciences for that fact. This pamphlet states that all children, regardless of their race, gender, sexual orientation, or any other factor, should be respected and treated with equality. So tell me why you want to shield your child from these works and that might honor another child's background. Tell me why we cannot learn about Stonewall, which is a pivotal moment for LGBTQ plus rights in America. Tell me why we cannot educate on the teaching of Black scholars in addition to Martin Luther King Jr. Tell me why we cannot learn about POC voices, learn about different religions, and escape a fixed mindset that some of us are trying to break free from. I hope that as parents, as students, as residents, as board members, as peers, you can understand what I'm trying to say and let our children make the most of the education that this town is offering. Thank you.
Rachel Gould. I'm a health and physical education teacher here in the district and current co-president of our Haddonfield Education Association. I have spent the entirety of my 18-year career here as a health and PE teacher throughout the district, teaching at all 3 levels, and in some capacity actually at all 5 of our schools. This unique perspective has afforded me the opportunity to see the amazing work that happens throughout all of our classrooms. Each and every member of our staff is invested in the children and this community. I am proud to stand among some of the most highly professional, dedicated group of educators whose commitment to each of our students creates a palpable pulse that becomes the heart of the school. I think it's important to recognize that each of us here in this room tonight is here because we're invested in the students of Haddonfield. We also need to recognize that each of us has developed our own values and beliefs. Where did those values and beliefs come from? As a health teacher, this is something I've discussed at all 3 levels of education. Our values shape who we are as a person, and we've developed those values throughout our lives, from our families, our surroundings, and our experiences. Our differences are what make us unique. If we all thought the same, looked the same, acted the same, had the same interest, how boring would this be? As an educator, I value the differences in each of my students because each and every child brings something special to the classroom. I like to think that kindness is something we're taught from the time we were babies. As parents, many of us have encouraged our children to say hello to people, to say please and thank you, to introduce themselves to a child who's alone on the playground. As they grow, we may have continued to encourage that they're kind to their classmates, their teachers, their coaches. As educators in our classrooms, we continue to foster these skills. Kindness is at the core of everything we do at school. We don't have to agree. We don't have to have the same beliefs or values, but we do need to be kind. We need to foster an environment where every student feels safe at school. We do need to support each student who walks into our classrooms. As public educators, we're tasked with meeting the needs of each learner. Those needs are not solely academic. They need to feel physically safe, mentally supported, and academically challenged. That is how we find success as educators. Rigor is important, but so is how they feel. And every student has a right to feel safe, included, and respected. As a health teacher, I spent my summer working to develop the curriculum for some of our health classes. And I feel obligated to address a few of the misrepresentations that have been shared throughout the community. Despite what is being shared, it's all right. I'll come back up. I'll give it a break.
Hey everybody. My name's Anthony Hollingworth. I'm from Roberts Avenue. I'm the father of a central cheetah and a middle school bulldog. When I look at the school curriculum and the recent attacks that have been made upon it and the pamphlets, what springs to mind for me is what are these, concerned yet anonymous citizens really afraid of? And, when I look at the state curriculum, it's transparent. Here it is in the school district as well. And I wonder what kind of strange interpretations of it lead to this kind of fear. I can only imagine it's just fear that people that are different, fear of people that live their lives in different ways or hold different beliefs. But here's the reality. Nobody is indulging in the kind of lurid sexual training that some people seem to think exists. It doesn't hurt kids to know that people live their lives in different ways. Nobody is brainwashing kids to be ashamed or saying they must constantly atone for the wrongs of their ancestors. Here's what I think. I trust our educators to provide age-appropriate lessons, even if the subject and knowledge involved are sometimes uncomfortable for some. I trust our kids to be able to understand and learn as they grow up what to do with that knowledge. Most of all, though, I trust Haddonfield families to be able to have all the freedom in the world to have those discussions with their kids at home.
To address the board.
And make sure that they remain the biggest single influences on their children's lives. And even when they do that, kids might do something different, but that's what they always do. That's what real freedom is. So, yes, this is public education, but that doesn't mean one small group can bully everybody else to changing the curriculum. I feel sad for people that read a reasonable and professionally developed curriculum and only see conspiracy theories and sexualization, frankly, whatever that means. I support the board in its position on the recent unfortunate events. I support the curriculum. Most of all, I support the people in our town who a misguided group unsuccessfully tried to marginalize and ostracize on the very first full day of school. That group's on the wrong side of history, and they're going to fail. If anyone here cares deeply about the topic, I encourage them to step away from the anonymity of their phones and their laptops and their pamphlets and actually run for election to the board. We don't need stunts like anonymous letters, and I expect in the future we'll see costly lawsuits or ridiculous calls to create charter schools or voucher programs, because that really would undermine our town's great education reputation. I say enough already.
Hi, good evening. I'm Shannon Carnegie. I live on South Hinchman. Thank you for letting us all speak. I know that there is plenty of research, both at the national level and specific to New Jersey, that show that 80 to 90% of parents actually want comprehensive sex ed in schools. So to me, the opt-out policy makes sense philosophically and frankly bureaucratically. I'm a parent that supports it. I know it's in our kids' best interest. I also have to dispute the fact that, yes, parents know our children, and it's absolutely important for us to communicate our values to our children, but in terms of teaching them about sex and gender, we have seen through public comments at board meetings and through the Facebook pages that a lot of parents don't know the information themselves and don't know what is actually age appropriate. I'm seeing many people conflating gender identity with sexual orientation. Those are two different things that developmentally come into existence and knowledge at two different ages. So I do think I trust, the state curriculum and the teachers to do that education, and then at home we can have those discussions and give context and make sure our kids understand our family values. That makes sense. That's what we're going to do in all the subjects. The other thing I wanted to say, and I think I've said this before, but that part of the job of research administrators and parents is weighing the benefits versus potential harms. We know through a lot of research that has found that LGBTQ youth who have affirming schools have a nearly 40% lower odds of attempting suicide compared to those youth in non-affirming schools. That is significant. And to me, honestly, that's a no-brainer. If having an affirming school can prevent the suicide of one child, then that is worth it. In my opinion, there are no other arguments that can outweigh that. And I will die on that hill, and I will say it at every board meeting if I have to. How much time do I have? 1 minute. Let me just say one more thing to parents that seem to fear having difficult conversations. I can certainly empathize with that. I think all of us have a fear of having difficult conversations with our kids. To me, teaching my kids that queer and trans people and family and students exist and deserve to be accepted and included and affirmed in our community as human beings and treated with kindness as part of the sort of diversity inclusion that we talked about earlier. That is not a difficult conversation. The conversations I'm having with my middle schooler, we got the text this morning about talking about fentanyl. I'm starting to talk to my middle schooler about substance use and overdoses. And as someone who lost a brother to an overdose, this is a difficult conversation. But it's part of my job as a parent to have those conversations so that I can prepare her for life. So I think we really need to think about the scale of what actual difficult conversations are, and accepting and affirming members of our student body and our community is just something we all have to do. Thank you.
My name is Wayne. I live on Center Street, and since a lot of people anyway are wearing T-shirts and having emblems and sort of have a designation, I'll just disclose to begin with that I have a 6-year-old grandson who's non-gender declared. And we're living with that in a wonderful way, allowing him to decide what that happens to be. So I may not be what I appear to be. But I don't think the chasm is as great as we may think it is. I really think that we have to take a different perspective. And to the gentleman over here, I think just for freedom, my eyes aren't quite that good. I apologize if I have it wrong. He talked about conflict resolution in SEL. The 39th president, Jimmy Carter, following his presidency, founded a nonprofit organization that was really focused on the prevention of and resolution of conflict. And one of the things that he organized that nonprofit around was everybody having the same information as soon as possible to be able to make decisions. Seems simple, but when people had the same set of facts and an understanding, that transparency allowed people to be able to find the commonality rather than being apart. The transparency that I'm speaking of, and as an observer, I don't have children in this school, nor is my grandchild here, seems to start at the beginning of a lot of what our curriculum is about. And what the conflict seems to me to be is that once it's in place, we have to argue about it. We need to begin at the other end. This tall, handsome guy that I talked to earlier in the evening said, how are we going to do that? How would you ever get any decisions made? Well, it seems like somehow, I don't know enough, and maybe somebody here will explain it, we have an equity council that has significant input and influence into what the curriculum happens to be. I've asked over 50 people over the last couple of weeks for reasons that have nothing to do with this, but I'm helping someone become elected to this board, I hope. I've asked people, do you know what the Equity Council is about? Very few even know about it. None know what it does. And I think we pay for them out of our budget. So these are the kinds of things that I think that parents on the whole, all these people over here that seem to not agree, we're closer. Excuse me?
You have to address us.
I'm sorry, my time's up?
No, you just have to address us.
Oh.
Don't, yeah,
Oh,
just to keep it.
Somebody else turned around and you didn't.
I did gavel him.
I didn't hear that. My hearing aid. Anyway, my point is really, I think we need to step back as a community. This is a great system. The question is how we find commonality to it and what systems are in place, i.e. transparency for parents to know both sides. What's coming, not what do I do because it came. Not be reactive, but be proactive. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Dr. Kevin Moore. I live on Hawthorne. I appreciate all the discussion tonight, and the distinction between curriculum and the sense of belonging, I think, is something I wanted to address, the different age groups and so forth, the entire 12 years versus the middle school and high school curriculum. When I was in the 3rd grade, I was bullied for being gay. I was beat up for 3 years running. The principal was very involved. There was a lot of really terrible things that happened. I'm happy to have survived that, moved on, healed in various ways. By the time I was in junior high, that was no longer an issue. So when you think about this curriculum, this sense of belonging, I want you to think about younger ages. Now, certainly the anti-bullying and the level of violence in this community is very different than the community that I grew up in. Although I grew up in a very white, middle class, everyone went to college kind of place. But I think you need to think more broadly about the implications of exactly how you show these sense of belonging and then what you put in the curriculum. And I would encourage you to think of younger instead of older. I have roughly half my time. I have a child in the school district who came out as a non-binary a little bit before the pandemic set in. They said, with tears in their eyes, I'm going to try to cry, that they were very supported by the middle school having an extracurricular group that allowed them to understand more about themselves and to feel a sense of belonging in their school because they didn't more broadly. This has been pivotal to them. And this was in the 6th grade. So again, I think by the time we're talking about curriculum that might start being presented in the 6th grade, again, we're already too late. As speakers before me have said, a sense of identity starts very early in life. And this is very influential, and I'd like you all to think about that. A third and final point, I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm very familiar with LGBTQ literature, psychotherapy, and related issues. There is so much evidence saying that indeed lives are at stake. The suicide epidemic is an epidemic we should take very, very seriously. And it's much, much higher for LGBTQ plus children. And so again, anything that we can do to have younger, more visible things and so forth. I understand that part of what this board is looking to do is to create some conversation, to create some possibilities, some exceptions, and to give sort of special dispensation to certain families that have objections to this because they don't want to have difficult conversations. While I understand that is a complaint, I think a difficult conversation for some families versus the life of a child. I would encourage you again to think about this very deeply, to look at the extensive psychological literature and research on this, and think about younger and more. Thank you.
Any other first comments? Okay, seeing, oh wait, do you have a first comment?
Yeah. My name is David Fuller. I live at 65 Lane of Acres here in Haddonfield. And we have 4 kids that we'd like to have in the school system. And I've talked about the fact that we feel it's unsafe for our children to be in the school system currently because we feel that they're excluded and they're not included despite the effort to have an inclusive environment. I think the very effort toward inclusivity has created an exclusive environment. And one of the speakers earlier today mentioned that I don't think we're as far apart as we may be because some of the public conversations can be very divisive and seem very polarizing. But I think what people are looking for is a sense of respect toward one another. And that inclusivity at its core should involve a respectful environment to people of different groups. And I'm glad the example that Dr. Brown presented earlier today, where she was celebrating and acknowledging some of the wonderful things that she's observed. But I think that very example can be very offensive to certain people groups that were acknowledged by Dr. Klaus earlier in terms of religion. And I think there may be different groups of religious people, whether it's Islamic, Jewish, Christian, may have a different view on some of these topics. So how do we include those people groups that we're meant to protect, that have civil liberties, that have religious liberties, and they're faced with curriculum that may be offensive to their worldview? Are we going to have teachers that are going to be protective and celebrate and acknowledge their worldview at the same time that other worldviews are being celebrated in a respectful, inclusive way? Thank you.
Hold on, we have to make sure there's no first comments.
Hi, Stacy Brown Downs, I'm an educator here, and I just wanted to share a conversation I had with a parent this week who reached out to me because her family has strong Christian convictions, and they love and respect everybody, they want everybody to be included, but they just wanted a heads up if there's going to be any material that might be, considered controversial or that has swear words in it or something, and we had a lovely conversation. We talked about how we can keep the lines of communication open. We talked about how the students are getting an option for independent study. And I sent her a list of young adult literature books that were Christian in theme, so that was something that her child wanted to choose. He could choose a book study on his own that was Christian in theme because I do love and respect all of my children and their families, right? And so the 2 pieces that come to mind is that this is a law we're arguing about, right? And so I feel like we're taking a lot of your time and the community's time about a law that we don't have the power to change. So I just don't know that further requests to change that law are a good use of anybody's time. And second of all, trying to opt out of learning about a group of people is just straight up discrimination. And it's just not something that we as educators would ever stand for. So I just wanted to put that out there as a member of the HEA and a member of the Equity Council who we are not paid. That council is not paid until this year. We have one building equity year that is paid. So just wanted to clear up some of those things.
Any other initial comments? Okay, so Walter and Rachel, you can.
I'll defer. I'll cut off fast.
So, thank you. I didn't say my name last time. I guess y'all know me. I'm Walter Weidenbacher, and I've been on So, two people now have said, we're not so far apart. I don't know why the great applause, why the ebb and flow. I think we're all pretty much saying the same thing, and that is that we're all concerned about the children. I think it's in The King and I, where Anna, I think her name is, it was the children, we can't forget the children. So that's what this is really all about, the children. I think we all agree on that, isn't it? Concern for the children. Here's my point. I've had 4 children, I've had 6 grandchildren, and I've had 2 great-grandchildren, and I know a lot about children. No.
That wasn't me.
That was not. The big computer.
Don't do this to me. So it's all about the children, and I love children, and I think everybody in this room loves the children. Here's my question. Who is responsible for the children when they're born? I think it's the parents exclusively. Am I wrong? It's the parents, and they have not only love and responsibility born out of love, but it's all about the parents and the children, the parents and the children. And my youngest daughter just had her baby a year and a half ago, and oh my goodness, is it wonderful to watch her becoming a parent and assuming this incredible love and devotion and responsibility to this kid. I'm delighted to see this in my little brat's development as she grows up and assumes the responsibility and the love of being a parent. Here's my point. At some point, we're required by law to send our children to a school to learn the 3 R's, or we say STEM now. You learn certain basic things that you need to function in today's society. And then the school decides, and the school, I'm going to say, is an oligarchy at this point, because it's a small group of people who have decided, well, we're going to teach the children something that you have not hired us to do. We're going to do this. And then the state passes down a mandate. You call it a mandate? I heard Patricia Klein say a couple of weeks ago, no, it's not a mandate. You're not required. And that still is a fuzzy thing to me. We can opt out of some of these things and we can't. I don't know what's going on, to tell you the truth, but I do know this, that everything that's being said tonight fails, not everything. I agree with everything. I didn't disagree with anything that anybody said, except somebody typified the group that was handing out flyers. That was wrong thing. What I'm saying is the parents are responsible for the children, and if you don't
Walk
do
back
what
to
your
your seat.
parents
Just talk
want,
fast and walk back to your seat.
I'm gonna check this out. It's probably wrong. The parents rule.
Do you need me to introduce myself again?
No, you're good.
It's not right time yet.
My second comment.
All right, I'm gonna pick up where I left off. As a health teacher and someone who spent their summer working on developing the curriculum for our health classes, I feel obligated to address a few misrepresentations that have been shared throughout our community. Despite what is being shared, we are not teaching your children that hormones are going to cause them to masturbate. That word does not appear in our curriculum. Our elementary health lessons related to sex ed are all about the changes in our body that happen during puberty and how hormones cause these changes. I have had the privilege of teaching the 5th grade girls' puberty lesson at Central School for many years. What I love about this lesson is not what I get to talk to them about. It's about the students finding comfort in asking questions. These questions are about how to navigate when they get their period at school, not about sex or self-pleasure. What if they have a male teacher and need to go ask to use the bathroom? Where will they keep their pads so that no one knows what they're doing? What do cramps feel like? These are the healthy conversations, and they afford our students the space to come together in these discussions. In middle school, we are not showing them pornography, nor describing oral, vaginal, or anal sex. Our 8th grade health unit focuses on respect for yourself and others, healthy relationships, abstinence, consent, and personal safety. The only mention of sex in our curriculum is when it's discussed how abstinence of oral, vaginal, and anal sex is the only 100% effective way to reduce the risk of sexually transmitted infections. The anonymous letter that was distributed to parents on the first day of school, as well as the follow-up letter, point to parents having to use their imagination as to what teachers are teaching their children about sex in both 5th and 8th grade. I hope that I have been very transparent in addressing these concerns and in an informative manner. The sexual decisions that we all make in life are more than being attracted to someone. They're related to the different values we hold, what we have learned from our parents, our culture, how we feel about our bodies. We recognize that these topics are sensitive, but as professionals, we have always understood that sitting in front of us are students with all different values and approach our lessons with that in mind. Finally, on a personal note, in the audience tonight, I see many of my colleagues and some of my students. I'm sure at home there are others watching. To each of you who, through these recent discussions of Board of Education meetings, publicly distributed letters, and social media posts have felt marginalized, undervalued, or unsupported because of who you are, how you identify, or what you believe, I want you to know that you matter. You are loved, and there are many here tonight that will continue to support you.
Jeff Stover again. I'd like to switch gears a little bit, go back to the issue that was discussed about board reevaluating how curriculum is approved. And that really goes back to, I think, what really is the concern of many parents here. What we've realized recently is that there has been not a great method of communication to parents, and apparently not even within the board and the school administration, of how curriculum is reviewed and what books are approved. Recently, one of the examples was new books that were introduced into the 5th grade curriculum that people said, hey, this is getting into areas that we're concerned about. We didn't know this. Parents discovered that. And apparently it was not known by many people because it was agreed by Mr. Klaus, who didn't know that this particular book, which is George, was even part of the curriculum. And in fact, the leadership team of the school board also didn't know that that was part of the curriculum that was approved for the 5th grade. So that leads me to the question saying there is clearly a disconnect between what is going on in the school board as it reviews curriculum and how the parents are knowing this and even how it's being distributed. So what I'd like to do, I'm glad that the board is going to reevaluate this situation, but what I'd like to know in this particular situation, the most recent curriculum revisions is how did some of these books get there? These are new books that were not there before. Someone obviously recommended them. Who? How is that process done? What's the discussion? Who votes on them? Who's pulled into those discussions? Then after that, how is it publicized to the parents? Is it distributed to the board? Does it vote on them, the superintendent? All stuff that apparently has not happened the way it should in an important manner, and especially so that the parents can know that what is happening within our schools. So that's what I'd like to know is, I'm glad it's being reevaluated, but I think in order to correct the problem, we need to understand what were the steps that has led us here and share that with the community. Not to bash people, but to understand, hey, we had a process that allowed things to go on. More important people who should know what's in our curriculum were not advised of that. So that's what we want. More transparency. Include us in the process. That's what we're asking for. Thank you.
Okay, we'll close public comment. Right.
So there's no one for now.
Well, only if you have any new information to add, like you have some comment to make or not.
Yeah, I'll switch to a different topic. My name is David Fuller again, 65 Lane of Acres, and I brought this issue up a couple of meetings ago where I was pleading for a safe and respectful learning environment, which I actually heard those exact words used by a couple of people today, that people want a safe and respectful learning environment. And the message that I had a couple months ago was those words are not in our mission statement. There's a mission statement, and then following the mission statement, there are 3 goals, and not a single word in there mentions education, which I find a little bit concerning when we have a mission statement and 3 goals from our Board of Education that don't mention education. Now, fortunately, there's a chance to improve this because when this was launched in 2019, I'm just reading from the goal, these goals will guide the district through the next 3 years. So I'm hopeful that these goals are now in a close because I think a lot of the curricular things that were put in were following these goals, and in line with these goals, some of the risky things that we're now trying to teach, which were included in the mission statement to take risks, which I opposed a couple meetings ago. So now that the 3 years has run its course on this mission statement, I'd like to advocate or know, is there a subcommittee, is there a group of people, is the board now rewriting the mission statement, are the board's goals being rewritten? Is there a committee addressing this? If not, I'd like to offer that this would be a good chance to do that, to rewrite all this, have a fresh start, look at these things, taking into consideration some of the opinions that have been advocated to include having a safe and respectful learning environment for everybody. If this isn't happening, I'd like to volunteer to be part of this. So thank you for considering that.
Okay, we will now move on to items for Board of Education approval. Thank you, everyone, for coming and, well, obviously you can stay, but thank you all because you're all doing. There you go. You're missing the good part.
Can we recess so we can hear and go to the bathroom?
Do you want to recess? All right, we'll do it.
I'm going to.
No, you. All right, thank you everyone for coming. Okay, this is quick, yeah. Jake, you want me?
Any questions that they can say today, but
Yeah, all right, we're not gonna recess. All right, so governance?
Are you gonna take a recess?
I think he had to go to the bathroom, but let him go, we're just gonna keep going. Because we only have, this is the working session, so I'm not gonna read through them all.
Yeah, just
But
give
I
us the
can
moment,
fully
because I had some questions at the end. Well, I don't know if we'll be able to hear until then.
Okay, so, governance, you let anyone? Thoughts?
Put a resolution in place?
Yes.
we have to write that.
Okay.
We'll have, and the other thing aside of that too is, I believe, I know people, we mentioned earlier, that who also would like to endorse that and be part of that in the community. And I'm certainly going to reach out to other superintendents in Camden County. Just once we get together, I will share with them and say, maybe not only us, but if all 30 school districts in Camden County say, and then all this and that, then that can be more of it's a movement.
I'd rather take more time and have that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's Alice's restaurant. You should know that.
Has anyone found out whether nearby schools are actually reporting it to their law enforcement versus they know about it but they're not?
It's 50-50. Some are saying I'm doing it, some are saying no. But what's happening now is the prosecutor, county prosecutor in this area is talks to us a lot, but he's also expecting this to happen. So that's where we are. So they're saying they're not. What happens is it's going to get a newspaper, and then it's going to be what we're at.
Yeah, so maybe we should talk to
There's no data.
I know, if they become public, then they drive it, but they're not public.
I know, it's like usually at least there's a couple people.
So we're still on policy, sorry. I had to-
So with this, I mean, that's one, I think with that.
Do we know who's taking the lead in writing that resolution?
Lynn, do you want to?
Happily.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna volunteer.
Too late.
She should say that they were going to try to get behind. They've got to be against that.
So
They'll be against this.
I talked to her today. She's been out of the country.
Okay.
So she was doing some research. I expect I'll talk to her again tomorrow. She actually recommended that we, as a committee, maybe policy committee, go and meet with our local legislators. I said, but they're not responsible for this. This is the Commissioner of Ed. But her initial reaction was that
if we meet, they would have a lot more pull in getting, or influence in perhaps getting some changes.
Yeah.
And one of our local legislators is the education head, so we, Pam Landau. And Lou Greenwald.
We worked with her with the HIB.
Yeah. So
That's a good idea.
this was that was her initial thought, but she was gonna do some more research and get.
Since we're in the question area, can someone just briefly talk about the sixth grade world language exploratory curriculum, just like 5 sentences, not detailed, just.
Yeah, I can. It's, so World Language Exploratory has moved towards, moved away from students having to select a language in grade 5 and stick with it for the full year in grade 6. Now all 6th grade students are exposed to all of the languages in quarters, Spanish, French.
Just thirds, Spanish.
In thirds.
Yes.
So a third of the year will be German, a third of the year will be French, a third of the year will be Spanish.
Fantastic. I really like that idea.
Me too.
We have some German going on in Central Elementary School.
Yeah, that's great.
It's getting some very good reviews, by the way.
So did we finish governance and we moved on to?
Oh, I'm sorry, I know it was, I thought I was doing jump. I just saw
Yeah, I think
yellow.
you did, that's okay, but I was.
in curriculum, right.
So I'd like to make a comment on policy 1511, and I was not here for the first reading last month. I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that we've removed a basic level of what we'll tolerate. It was written in a way that it was almost a requirement to hit the WCAG 2.0 level AA, and that was specifically stricken. What double A adherence adds is screen reader support. So as you heard some people in the public say, it's hard to hear. It's hard to see too sometimes. So the double A level allows for responsive design. So when you set like your computer to large font, the website you go to respect that setting and give you large font. It might not be in the layout that you design that website, but it's one that they can read. It allows for screen readers to more easily be able to read the content of the site for those that have that need. I'm not here to ask this to be put back in the policy level, but I'm making a recommendation at the spirit of inclusion that during the regulation period or just as a direction to the website folks, when you go to buy new things, that it meets a minimum level that all people can, not just because it looks good the way they designed it, but it'll be effective the way people want to read it. So the rest of the policy, I'm completely fine with. I just wanted to make comment that not even in the policy, but maybe in the regulation, that at least we still try to hit the double A standard, and it's 2.1 now.
Dave, I have very, very familiar with this, and I've dealt with it. And when I read about the cost component, I'm very aware of that as well. So I agree with you that moving forward, if we're going to redo the website, then we most certainly should do that and have that compliance in place. But there is a hefty cost component to it. So when I read that, I get it. And being on the other side of it, I'm sorry that the litigious society that we live in, there are more people out there that are fishing for lawsuits to make sure that, if you haven't hit the standard, so there's that component as well. So I get what you're saying. I read that and I was like, that's spot on. And moving forward, I agree with you. If we're going to take on something new, take that into consideration. But I didn't read that and think we failed.
No, I wouldn't think we failed, but our website isn't up to the standard of our own policy. So it was written and it wasn't followed. So the answer to strike it, to make us compliant, It certainly wasn't the spirit of the board that wrote that policy. and it wasn't even followed. So I'd say take it out of the policy, because that's our guidance, but certainly leave it in the regulation, or at least make it a goal.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
New topic under whatever section we're in, policy, governance. I tried at home, and I just tried right now. I can't open up the 2023-24 high school calendar, so just if someone can look it up.
I was able to, so maybe I have rights to.
Yeah,
I'll make
I
sure
think
rights
I
right
have
there.
rights.
That might be the Chuck thing, I'll make that first.
Just looking at it the other day.
So any more governance? So what should we do with Dave's suggestion here? Should we, or like what?
No, I was just making a comment.
Okay.
I'm actually not advocating that any wording change.
Oh, okay.
I'm pointing out that we didn't really follow the old one, and we should have it as a spirit guide in the regulations.
Yeah, that's.
Thank you. Okay, curriculum special education?
So I just, on B, the resolution for virtual or remote instruction, under meal service plan, it says, we still have free meals for all the kids.
Oh.
And pick up on Wednesdays.
Oh,
So
gosh.
just that. It's-
And that was just approved by the state, so. Missed that.
Gino's buying lunch for $800.
I mean, I just submitted the report last week, I can't believe they.
I think they're just stapling back.
A single nerd.
One
grade.
I
Enjoy.
There's 2,700 kids, Gino's taking them down.
Lynn, what, that's under the lunch part?
It's under meal service plan.
Thank you.
You said there was a mom. I feel like I should say for the record that people are like, what? I was jumping. Okay, anything for personnel? Business and finance?
Oh, wait, I had a question on
Uh-huh.
that. Is it under personal? So the curriculum and special ed.
I was just saying it. We'll go with you. Where are you at?
So real quick, the after-school vaccination clinic, it's solely for students or is it
No,
also for the public?
Anyone.
Okay. So, just to keep in mind, you don't have to change it, I'm not gonna, but we've had discussions in the past about like, and this is open and it's unlocked, but just, whether or not we should lock off parts of the building and stuff for safety measures. And now it's, I'm not saying anything against it, I'm just saying, think about, keeping in mind safety measures, yeah, building security. And it's not even vandalism or something, just when we were talking about, bigger things of violence, so it was just more.
Are they here, or are they still in Wedlock?
No, so we never did vaccinations over at Wynn. That was only when we were required to do COVID testing.
Oh, testing.
All of our vaccination clinics are held in the Central School Auditorium. And just to know from a staffing perspective, we didn't adhere to this as we did the clinics at the end of the year because we were only getting 20 or 30 people. But right now we have almost 100 people already pre-registered. And we typically have between 6 and 8 school personnel working that clinic, working both entrances, or we only open up 2 entrances. There are staff members positioned there. There are staff members positioned in the, as they enter the all-purpose room, and someone positioned where they exit the all-purpose room and make sure they go where they're supposed to go next, which is the cafeteria for the waiting period. And then they're shown out. So we do have staff members scattered throughout, facilitating and monitoring the flow of people.
Thank you. Humans. Vaccinees.
Yeah, something like that.
Any other questions on that? Approval of the minutes? Any questions on the minutes? We're not voting.
The only question I have on the finance is, so the agreement with the fifth behavior company, I couldn't find it on the agenda for next week yet. Was it put on yet? It's under curriculum. Oh, it's under curriculum. Oh, I was looking under finance. F. Or new behavioral network.
Any items for future sorry.
Can I ask one more question? I thought it was under food service, but I don't think it is. The resolution with, Haddonfield Friends, I was just curious. Is that at the same price that we pay? Okay, what does that cost?
Quite, it is, I think the variance is like 10 cents, 25 cents.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you argue.
Yeah, oh yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, that's how.
No, I'm just amazed.
It was last year, right? That you said like it was like 10 or 15
Yeah, we raised, including our own meal prices, we raised them 10 cents from last year.
Are we ready for any questions on the minutes? Items for future consideration of board?
I just wanted to, since the public didn't thank Chuck for all the work that they asked for him to do about great inflation, thank you.
Yeah,
That was a lot of work.
That was a whole lot of work.
Dan Licata did a lot of it too, I have to say that.
Well, thank you, Dan, as well.
And Lincoln was very helpful, so. Probably shouldn't say that, but you have to be sleep last 4 days. We'll go with the honesty. Thank you.
I was wondering if we should do a curriculum topic for one of our working sessions.
Absolutely.
Because there's so much, like, you determine curriculum. No, I don't. Like, I just think it's just, they're thinking it's transparency, but they don't really understand the process, which I can understand, like, let's be transparent about the process maybe.
One of the upcoming presentations I've had, I didn't have my slide deck today, but I've had the selection and approval of materials as an October topic for 3 months now.
Right.
Next week, I'm supposed to do the clearinghouse, where the kids go to college and that.
Yeah.
So those things have been on there for a while. So
Agreed.
So
Like
I'll
I said,
make
that's
sure I
expressing
emphasize
frustration over being told, like, you aren't doing something, and I'm like, it's not my job as a board member, you know, like, but that's just me venting for.
No, I think that's a really good idea as we think about future working session topics. What we need to, when we're hearing something so many times and we've tried to correct it and make it clearer and it's not working.
That won't be words. That'll be me telling you how we're doing.
Right.
Right. Chuck, that doesn't sound like a good way to do it.
don't have any say.
Right, yeah.
But we could have a discussion about
Correct.
it.
Yeah, we have a discussion about it. Yeah.
Because I
And
feel like
why-
with public comment, we can't respond, but I take some notes, and so I'm ready for us to talk about it.
Right.
To try to clarify what
Yeah,
I'm
so-
hearing. Does that make sense?
That's why I present you more than welcome to
Yeah.
ask questions.
Yeah.
And you may say, boy, it's interesting that, I know that this is a great resource. Have you ever considered that? Or like the process for selecting library books. We have a very specific process. We know the 5 places they go to look. We know library books are not board approved, not supposed to be. And as a matter of fact, you can't have one pulled if you want to. You don't have the authority. It's a First Amendment right. So that's just like something we talk about.
Yes.
The part that really is going to be, the classroom libraries in the elementary school are the places that's a nebulous place. The high school novels are easy. They put it, we did one today, Gospel of Columbus, right? Puts it through. Classroom libraries are built on the fly. Right? So that's something we have to discuss how that happens. I also think that summer reading needs to be board approved, right? So board approved if the selection is fewer than, let's say, 4 or 5 to pick, right? Yeah. So if you're a senior college prep student, your summer reading is go get a memoir and read it. I'm going to prove you have a memoir.
Right.
But if you're in there, you can choose between Don Quixote, there's 3 books. They either prove it's one of these 3, then approve those 3. Because that's not really selection. I mean, it is selection because you're selecting that such a small group. So I think they're the type of things, and we don't do that right now. That's got to change.
Yeah.
I think I'm supposed to get rid of the summer homework altogether.
Yeah, I'm with you.
That's a different.
No, man.
I had a conversation.
A lot of it.
I had the conversation with ELA with some news teachers today. Like, what's the goal? Is the goal to teach children to be lifelong readers? Because reading Don Quixote doesn't do that.
No.
Right? Is the goal to extend the curriculum in AP because we're a month behind every other school? Yes. Well, okay, that's a different issue, right? So that's That's how we have to look at, so why are we doing it? And then say, well, if the goal is to make lifelong readers, go get choosing a memoir and reading is a way better assignment than reading, I keep throwing Don Quixote, because they used to be English for years, and all the kids would be crying.
It brings us to look at calendar up.
Yes.
It brings it full circle now.
You know, what's really unfortunate is that there are things that are lost. There are things that we say in public that are lost. I very much appreciate the fact that we decided, the administration decided that having one single person in charge of curriculum that is completely disconnected from what's happening in the classroom was not right for our school. The questions of, how did this happen that the administration and the board didn't know about this curriculum? Well, how did it happen is because we had a role that didn't work for this school, and we got rid of that and put a new process in place. And that's how it happened, and it was recognized and it was addressed, and hearing that we're going into the ELA curriculum and digging deep and changing things. It's unfortunate that that's lost, but I think that the people at this table understand it.
I think you have to be careful how you word that. I think we're at a point where we perhaps see a better way to create cohesion, but when that position was first created, it was because Central was doing something, Lizzie was doing something, Tatum was doing something. There was no join between elementary school and middle school, no join between middle school and high school. We're now addressing that, but a lot of times when companies transform, they can't go from maturity level 1 to maturity level 5. They have to, sometimes you can jump from 1 to 3, but not every time. So we went from 1 to 2, and now we're going from 2 to 3, but it wasn't that it was wrong, it was what we needed at that time, and we're now progressing further. I had 3 other points, but I don't wanna, if you had something else to say on that topic.
It really, I'm not looking to say what happened years ago. I'm frustrated to hear people say, I don't understand how the administration and the board how did something get in there that was not approved? The answer is exactly that. That's how it happened. And it was addressed way back in the spring, and now a new process is in place. And my frustration is that the recognition that to say this wasn't working, we changed it, and we're doing better is lost. That's all I'm saying.
So I mean, they're cherry picking a particular book that we just read, the state law said 5 through 12, right? Because some middle schools in 5th grade. I mean, it's not, we didn't do anything inappropriate.
No,
Our physics scores are
but
great.
the book was never board approved and put on the curriculum, which is a big deal, right? Because if an English teacher taught Gospel Colonus, we didn't vote on it, we don't vote on it next week, that's a big deal, right? That's a big deal because that's not how it works. And so the fact that that's on a library, so that's not a big deal. The fact that the book was written into a curriculum is a big deal. And if a teacher had taught that book, they'd be hanging out there, right? There would be no protecting them, right? Because they put something, so that's the difference in that. If the book had been board approved, that was no big deal.
Right.
You don't like, that's different.
I'm so glad that you brought this up for next board meeting, and I'm so glad you're gonna talk about it. For years, there have been things that I have said, I think we ought to be allowed to talk about it. And I felt like people tried to control, or this is not the role of the board, or this is not this or that. I'm totally fine personally, I believe, with George. I've looked at what it covers. I put it on my thing today to read it page for page, but I don't have an issue with that. People from the old board know, I'm going to give you an example. There used to be a film class that used to teach a film that I love. It's a great film. I'm personally uncomfortable with that film being taught in high school, even if parents are okay with it in their homes, because I feel like schools ought to maybe see, you know what I'm talking about, it's Pulp Fiction, so you can make your own judgment. I love the film. I just don't think it's appropriate for, but from a film perspective, it was revolutionary, but it's not something about discrimination or whatever. My point is that, and I'll also bring up one other thing. I think it's called Seed Folk, is a book maybe in 7th grade.
Yeah, 7th grade, yeah.
Okay, and I'm saying this now because there's nobody in the audience, because I would hate to embarrass a child of mine. But at that time, I don't know if people will go the way of it. It's not, my point is that my daughter is a super smart and fierce woman, and I'm so proud of the woman she's become. I think that there were times that she, which I love this about her, was very sheltered, not even from me, it was her personality. And when the time that that book came up, we had not had a family conversation about abortion, only because I'm busy doing my own work, doing my own life, and you talk about things as they come up, and that book talks about that subject. And I found out about it like the night before it was gonna be discussed, and I was upset because nothing had been sent home to me as a parent. So my second point was just, as we're having all these conversations, I wasn't saying that it was inappropriate at that age, but some kids may have already talked about it and know about it, and other kids may not. Like some kids may talk about it in 6th grade, other kids may not talk about it till 9th grade, and the note to parents is really good. So my
Okay,
point.
then let's wrap up, because it's getting late and I don't want to get off on items for future board consideration.
Sure,
So I'm
I
just-
do feel like other people talk longer, but go ahead.
No, I didn't
So
do it.
future
I
thing
didn't
is
want,
that
but I
I'm
don't
happy
want
to
to.
review the process on curriculum and how it's chosen. I'm trying to give examples of why I feel it's important. I wanted to reiterate why I think it's important to give parents a heads up and make sure that every teacher knows it in every class. And the third thing I wanted to talk about is, we did mention in our retreat, things about perhaps a board charter, which I'm not sure, depending on how it's discussed, if I would agree with everything, but I certainly have ideas about things that could be in a charter if other people agreed. So I'd love to have that on a future topic for discussion.
That could be the working session.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be, yeah.
The working session.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Okay, anything else for items for future consideration? Okay, motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Okay,